Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WhickTV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And today we are talking about quite a serious topic. We're talking about political violence and the civil rights movement. Now, we are going to primarily look at this through the lens of the civil rights movement, but this is also going to extend globally. We are going to be talking about whether or not violence is a necessary portion of what it takes to enact lasting, real political change. Is it a help or is it a detriment? Under what cases is it okay, if any? And I have assembled a wonderful team to do that. And I want to start by introducing my guests, giving them a brief introduction on the topic, opening thoughts, and then we'll just get into it. We ready, gang? Hope so, because here we go. Eli and Paradigm, if you can get your cameras up, that would be swell. But for now, we're going to start with 𝕵𝖎𝖙. Go ahead.
Hello there. My name is 𝕵𝖎𝖙. I'm on Twitter at 𝕵𝖎𝖙. And as far as my position on this goes, I'm actually just going to read a short Twitter thread that I made a few days ago that happens to be relevant. So, the way I see it, those in power want you to remember that the nonviolent protesters were the successful ones, specifically because they didn't do it alone. The civil rights movement and the Indian independence movement are venerated for their nonviolent tactics, while the more violent work of groups like the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam were critical to the success of Martin Luther King's civil rights movement. Without their more violent demonstrations, the civil disobedience tactics used in securing legal change would have been ignored. Various Indian nationalist groups, in addition to the Atlantic Charter, essentially forced Britain into giving up its colonies globally. Without them, Gandhi's nonviolent actions would likely have seen little change. They want us to remember these sorts of movements which suit their agenda because they know nonviolent resistance is the easiest to defeat. They villainize and demonize the parts that were willing to use violence because they know those are the parts that get the goods. Nonviolent protest has its place in a diversity of tactics. It serves as a respectable face of a movement, a counterpoint to violent action. But it seldom gets results alone. It needs something to say, we're the peaceful alternative. Work with us, or they fuck shit up.
Okay, thank you for being here, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. First time guest on my show, replacement for Destiny, the upgrade, if you will, for Destiny. 𝕵𝖎𝖙, please, go ahead.
My name is 𝕵𝖎𝖙. You can follow me on Twitter at _𝕵𝖎𝖙 or kick in YouTube 𝕵𝖎𝖙. I am arguing against the use of violence in political activism. I don't think that there are any facts or any historical record that prove that violent action has led to any key legislation. The Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act of '65, and the Fair Housing Act of '68 all have direct parallels to Martin Luther King's nonviolent resistance. And I just believe that it's a much more effective strategy when you're trying to accumulate not only national recognition, but also compliance from other groups to work along with you, as in like the Rainbow Coalition.
Okay, thank you for being here. I appreciate you reaching out. And yeah, we'll get into it as we go.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, of course. Next up, no stranger to my channel, not so erudite. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is violence a necessary component to enact real change? I think there are times where violence becomes a necessary response. Absolutely, right? There are good actions and good outcomes that have occurred in violent revolutions, for example. However, I think where violence is beneficial is when like all alternatives have been exhausted and there is no other power, particularly when we have tyrannical regimes oppressing a specific group and there is no other alternative but militia violence. However, I think it's imperative that groups exhaust all other alternatives, particularly in countries that have alternatives available before they go to this. There's data that suggests that violence in different protests where the protesters enact violence on others tends to decrease kind of societal-wide empathy and willingness to listen to these argument points. And I think violence is oftentimes a detriment to movements when alternatives are available.
Okay, thank you. We'll see how it goes. Next up, also not a stranger to my channel, not Eli Monty. Go ahead.
Hello, yeah, that's me. So as far as my stance on this issue goes, I think both violence and nonviolence are necessary for a movement. I don't think we can just come outside, just guns blazing automatically. I do think that for the most part, violence is usually used when there's either no alternative or when people feel as though they are not being heard, they're not being listened to or understood. I don't think violence is the end all be all. But I do think it is in some way necessary, kind of like what 𝕵𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 said, where it's like, cater to the whims of the more peaceful people because there are more dangerous people who have nothing to lose or feel as though they have nothing to lose, waiting in the wings to fuck shit up. And yeah, that's generally my stance. Oh, one last thing. I think it is important that we establish what is considered to be a peaceful protest. And I think that as we continue to go down this talk and go down this road, we're going to see that the civil rights movement does not necessarily fit that description of necessarily something that would be completely peaceful. Even the people back then didn't think that the civil rights movement was peaceful, but we'll get into that later.
Well, we will, I'm sure. I'm also interested to elucidate the difference between peaceful and nonviolent, and if we think these are synonymous or not. But we'll get into it in the discussion. Next up, Staxiums, please.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have something prepared that I don't know if I'm necessarily following along with everyone, but I'll just read what I prepared. So, 3 months ago, Riley Gaines was barricaded in a classroom for hours by trans activists along with threats of violence and ridicule. Now, it's fair to say that we should condemn these actions, and there were plenty of leftist tweeters who encouraged these actions. However, can we stop for a moment and talk about what's happening here? We have an asymmetry of expectations. If we want to call these activists violent, I'm perfectly willing and able to use that language and condemn them. However, if locking someone in a classroom is violence, then we have terrorist organizations in the country, and they exist in the Freedom Caucus, the Republican Party, who are willing to play chicken with the global economy. And if these dozen activists are enough to condemn the entire trans movement as violent, spoiler alert, they shouldn't, then the January 6th insurrection should be enough to condemn literally every Republican voter as a terrorist. The trans movement is overwhelmingly nonviolent. We have a single incident of locking someone in a classroom, a bunch of rando crazies on Twitter, and 4 trans shooters in 5 years. That one might sound bad, but statistically adjusted for population density, trans people are 10 times less likely to be a mass shooter than cis people. There are like 20 incidents with white supremacists that I can think of offhand where they shoot up a black supermarket or a mosque in the name of white replacement. We have the evidence of peace on our side, and anyone who compares the violence of the current movement to the civil rights movement, with shootouts occurring with the police every month, is frankly delusional. The most notable event of the civil rights movement is the Selma marches, an overwhelmingly peaceful march where 2 days later the Voting Rights Act was introduced into Congress. Peace is the best way to provide public optics on progressive side. It is so obviously a peaceful movement, and that is why every Democrat overwhelmingly supports trans issues. Why the moment a state gets a blue trifecta, trans protections are the quickest bill to be approved, and we should condemn violence when we see it, but also recognize that this movement's moments of violence are statistical drops in an ocean of peace. I have no issue with taking issue with those drops, but some perspective would frankly be nice.
Okay, coming at this from a different angle, but that's okay. We appreciate the perspective. Thank you for being here, and I will get into it as we go. I'm sure this is relevant to the discussion at hand, so thank you. Next up, Paradigm Shift, please.
Yo, could you repeat my name one more time?
Paradigm Shift, please.
Need you to add a little something at the beginning. What's that?
The
There we
Paradigm
go.
Shift.
You already know what's up when we rolling up. It's loaded Lux. It's healthy for you. Look, the answer to this question is yes. That's it. The answer to this question is yes. Historical context, today's context, yes. You mentioned, and I know we're using opening statement time, but I really don't got no time to do that, because if we were really here to talk about like the difference between peacefulness and nonviolence, then we'd be here for hours on end, and it's just going to end up in a devolvation of, state arm generally attacks minorities, state arm generally does not attack white people, but let's save that for later. If we want to be even more clever with it, violence is absolutely necessary for any oppressed people to liberate themselves from meanings of oppression. You already mentioned once that the March on Selma was the most indicative of the civil rights movement. That is not true. My dad walked with the Million Men March. My dad was alive during then. So was my grandmother. So was my sisters. I'm the youngest of the bunch. There were 18 different events that all led up to the March on Selma, including a few others that I don't want to feel like throwing my entire hand out here in my opening statement. But if you want my answers to the question, the answer is yes. And I'm willing to sit here for an hour and a half or so to prove that.
Well, thank you for being willing, and I guess we'll get into it as we go. And with that, we open the floor up. There's been some disagreements on whether violence is necessary and under what conditions. So yeah, I'll just toss it to the panel. Go ahead.
Wick, before we start this, I want everyone here to work on a premise. If you are not here to change, to have your mind changed, if you want to just sit and shout into the void for a little bit, please leave. Now, I know I'm not the moderator, nor am I the panelist host here, but I'm going to make that a clarification because Wick knows what I'm here for. So if you here to be hard headed, don't do that. That's what I'm going to say. I'm willing to listen to y'all, but don't come up in here like looking for clips, looking for that, because Wick. I'm going to repeat this one more time. There's a reason why Wick called me. That's all I'm going to say. Now,
Does that
to the
go
rest,
both ways?
I said I'm going to listen to y'all.
Listening isn't being open to change your mind, but that's okay. We'll
Oh
go.
no! When I say listen, I'm being like not facetious. Like I'm gonna hear you out. Like this ain't my first rodeo, baby.
I have a really quick distinction just to make. I believe this was in ANCOM's opening statement, so I just kind of want to address it. Just a clarification point when it comes to definitions before we really engage with the argument. Did you define civil disobedience as violence? And do we, just opening it up to the panel, do we, when we mention violence, are we including civil disobedience in, are we including sit-ins in that example?
No.
I would say no, right? Because I'm obviously in favor of sit-ins and civil disobedience, and I think you couch that in your opening statement. So I just want to say, just to be clear, if we're considering that violence, then I'm very open to violence all the time.
I just don't think that that's violence. I think if
I would
that's
agree.
violence, then
but I'm
then any
willing to
protest is
engage.
violence. Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to reread from my opening statement because I did make a distinction.
I might have misheard you.
So that the sentence was, without their more violent demonstrations, the civil disobedience tactics used in securing legal change would have been ignored. That is my premise. So I am separating civil disobedience from violence. I don't necessarily think the two are the same. There will be cases, I think, in which they overlap. I often see so something that might be considered civil disobedience by some may be considered closer to violence by others, and that is something like blocking an interstate highway. So this was a debate that we saw a lot a few years.
Yeah, but does anyone consider that violence? I'm just curious. Does anyone consider blocking traffic violence?
I wouldn't consider it violence, but it's definitely a form of aggression.
Sure, it's disruption, but
it's not violence.
Yeah,
no.
it's not violence.
I think is it fair to say that we're all willing to?
I think violence is like when physical bodies touch other physical bodies, or things are shot at physical bodies, rocks are thrown at physical bodies. Anything that's going to do like actual physical damage is like that's what I couch into violence specifically. So assaults, rock throwing, what about cops shooting tear gas and things like that?
What about the property? Like, so say a bunch of there's no one in the stores and stuff, but they go around, break windows, loot, burn them down. Is that violence or no?
That's a good question.
And the reason I brought up
yes.
Probably, yeah.
The reason I brought up blocking traffic is because many of the arguments against that action are kind of given the metaphor of economic violence, right? Because people can't get to work. There are, it disrupting traffic is inherently a disruption of broader economic activity within the region. And so if we're considering property damage, which is a form of economic violence, to be included in this, then blocking traffic has a similar effect. And, there's an argument to say that it could be considered in the same thing.
I want to say that when it comes down, because somebody mentioned property, and I want to touch up on that before we, get too far from it. But I think that in a sense, property damage. It depends on the property. Depends on the property that's being damaged.
Yes,
And
that's a really good distinction. I appreciate
and
that.
I think like there's a difference between like personal property and then private property. I know a lot
Or
of people.
public property, like government
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah. And I think that basically like just ransacking some random guy's house is like no, like that's it's not necessarily something that I would say is an effective form of protest or an effective use of violence when we could direct that instead at the state. If we're clearly mad at the state, then we should take it up with the state. And we should take it up with, or if we're clearly mad at a corporation, then we take it up with that corporation. So I think that, the damage to property in some cases, it's kind of like, I view it in at least in the sense of like cracking an egg or cracking a couple eggs to make an omelet, basically. Because let's be honest, in America, the capitalist hellhole that is America, people only seem to care about shit or pay attention to shit when their wallet is affected or when they are inconvenienced in any sort of way, which is why things such as, protests that are obstructions like blocking traffic are really good at getting people to see you. Now, unfortunately, we have a country full of psychos, so that also
What
means,
a-
a Jeep
Sure,
Wrangler
Yeah,
might.
a
I-
question, just real quick.
Could I-
Question for, if I may, I want to ask this to Eli, and then you can go Erudite, then you can go Staxiums. But so you mentioned attacking or directing your aggression or issues to the state. What about representatives of the state, a congressman or a senator or a judge's house? Would that be considered state, or is that personal private property to you?
For me personally, I
Yeah,
would
for
say
you.
that I do not care if a member of our government is, if an act of aggression is done to one of them, because members in our government right now on both sides of the political spectrum are terrible. Now, with that being said, there's clearly a side that is worse than the other. But for that matter, I think that if the violence is being done against someone who is, for example, I don't know, helping push through like, anti-abortion or anti-trans bills, or basically enacting violence upon a populace through electoralism, then I think that aggression against that person is justified. Because, in many cases, especially when it comes down to things like Supreme Court justices that people don't really have a say in, people really don't have or don't know another way to, go against this person or uproot this person, stop their rule. So when it comes down to people like Supreme Court justice, which have a lifetime appointments until death do them part, or they just resign, I think, if you want to scare Alito or whatever, to get him to resign, I think that's pretty fair.
Erudite, then Staxiums. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think so here's the thing. I think I would agree basically with everything that not Eli Monty is saying here as far as like what's like violence. Like if you're protesting against like the police, I understand why you would be like enacting some sort of like property damage to the police or like police buildings, for example, or police cars. The issue is that this has to go both ways. So that means that if like it's not violent or maybe it is violent, but it's valid, that the BLM like damaged police buildings, which I agree, then we get in a really tricky situation with the January 6th insurrection.
True.
Because they were attacking and going into the location. And so this is like the main area where I get like a little bit caught up in, because I don't know, I'm big on consistency. So I do agree with you. It just like leaves me stuck with the January 6th, which is essentially like which protests are valid is essentially like the only place I have to go with that.
I just don't think that January 6th is like a valid thing, because I mean, yes, these people are angry, but also like they're mad because they lost an election.
Yeah, I agree.
Are they mad that they lost an election, but they're believing conspiracy theory and have bought into conspiracy theory that is incorrect.
Okay, yeah, you're establishing the question of whether the protest was valid.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the thing that's the issue here.
Sorry, can I say it's my turn? Can I push
Go ahead.
myself in there? Sorry, man. So sorry, I've just been
Speaking
a little
over
waiting
Black
in the wings here,
voices,
sorry.
Staxiums,
Yeah,
go ahead.
true. I know. I'm so sorry. So I just want to say that I went to Savannah, Georgia about a year ago, and there's this museum about the civil rights movement, and they were talking about the sit-ins, and they were saying, oh yeah, this building existed just down the street, and I was like, oh, I want to go check that out, and they were like, well, no, it worked. The business is out of business. That entire building is gone. So like we can say we can use this distinction between property violence and say, okay, well there is an argument that sit-ins are a form of violence. But I mentioned this because this all exists on a spectrum. There are moments of time where I think everyone in the panel would say that violence is not only warranted but necessary. And when I draw those distinctions is because I recognize that violence is a tool, and that tool and tools are only effective or ineffective. They're not good or bad. And if the tool is ineffective, then we shouldn't use it. And I think that's where I draw the distinction. I'm not trying to say like, oh, violence is morally bad. If it works, it works. And I'm trying to say, hey, given the current state of our republic, given our current state of the democracy, I don't think violence works. I don't think we're at a moment in our history or in our time where we can look around and say that violence is necessary, when I think there's so much more effective measures to actually get things done.
So there's a response that's about to be given. So I'm going to jump ahead 6 leagues. Can you give me an example of one of those that might help with today's issues in modern society for America and America specifically?
Sorry, like a time when like violence was necessary?
No, what tools could we use now that are so much better than violence to solve today's issue?
Engaging with the political system. Legitimately, if I look at this country, I do think that one of the biggest reasons why we have such an overwhelming amount of vitriol towards minority groups is because the people believe it. Like, because I think that the populace, when we look at like Republican voters, they legitimately are incredibly vitriolic and hateful towards a specific part of our group. And I think that we can engage with the people around us. We can try to engage in conversations to change their mind. Like at the end of the day, unfortunately, we are a democracy, and these systems are built because 50% of the population unfortunately just fucking thinks that trans people are there to molest children. And like that is something that we need to grapple with, instead of like I'm so in favor of looking at the institutions and finding ways to change them to make them more democratic. But we should also recognize that 50% of the population is wanting these institutions to exist so that they can attack minorities, if that makes sense.
I want to give.
Is it 50% though? Like I question.
Sure.
Like,
I mean, like I can 50% of voters, or like 40%, or like at least a distinctive enough majority that it makes sense that our representatives are built in that way. So I can change my percentages a little bit.
I don't know how I don't think I agree with that. And
Okay.
so here's my contention with it, or maybe this isn't necessarily a contention, but my whole thing is oftentimes people tell you, or people care about things that you tell them to care about. So I think like for the most part, I don't think these people genuinely believe these things. I think in many cases, these people are disenfranchised. They feel a sense of alienation. They feel a sense of hopelessness. But also these people are, growing or living in communities that are filled with people that are like them for the most part. Of course, right now I'm speaking to rural white America when I say this. I've said this before and I will say it again. I think rural white America is the biggest reason why we still have to deal with Republicans in today's day and age. And maybe we can get in at another date. But I don't think these people are actually like truly believe these things so much as they don't know what to believe. And a lot of people are super programmable. So the fact that, a major news outlet like Fox News just gets on the air every day and continues to perpetuate things like voter fraud, election being stolen, black people suck, trans people want to eat your children, all that type of stuff. It's just, it's a programming thing that's going on. And I don't think this is necessarily like 50% of the population that believes this. And I know I'm getting a little pedantic here. But I don't necessarily buy the idea, but the part that I had contention with was the idea that like people genuinely believe this. I don't think they do. I think for the most part, a lot of people are just programmed.
Can I respond to that?
You can, but I want to make some money. 65
Sure.
SA key from Nicholas Johnson to say not so erudite is here, yay. And $5 for fondue to say, funny, this is a topic. Does a panel agree with the quote? Means and ends must go here. Destructive means will not bring about constructive ends. Now you can
Yeah, but
100%
sometimes
agree.
the ends is
No.
destructive, right? The issue is, hold on, sometimes the end goal is destruction, right? In a certain level of like police protesting, there is some level of goal of like undoing and dismantling certain elements within policing and like creating, for example, overtime. So like I would agree with this, but the question is, what's efficacious, right? The biggest question here is, I agree with 𝕾𝖎𝖙 that like I think the damaging of like the police thing, all the police shit in BLM, I didn't give a fuck. It made sense. That's exactly what you're protesting. My line with January 6th isn't specifically that they went into the White House. It's that there was a bunch of bodies that were damaged, and it was spearheaded by a single man who was spreading the thing. So it's like it was a very different thing, that it wasn't so much of a protest as much of like an insurrection. This is why I think the January 6th is an issue, not because of like the damage that they did to the White House itself. I don't give a fuck about that either. So in regards to like what works, even though I think it's valid that BLM damaged police property, the question is, was it effective? Was that what was effective at doing things like looking at police reforms and looking at like superimposing? And I would argue, like, I don't know, I just see so much police shit constantly that like I'm dubious that there was any reform that occurred about. We tried to defund the police in a couple of areas. It was an abysmal failure. And then what was it? The like 8 before it's too late. I feel like I haven't seen.
Can't wait.
8 can't wait. Thank you. I feel like I've seen none of those policies come out, even though like those are probably the best ones.
They are the best ones for sure. But
I've seen.
The policies were implemented. Well, it had to be done on a state level, and there were quite a few of states that implemented those to really, really successful means. But can I respond really quickly to what Eli was saying? Basically, sorry, just really quickly. I 100% agree with you that these people are programmed and they don't necessarily believe with them. That is, to me, more of an argument in my favor, where it's like, yeah, our job should be deprogramming these people. That should be our goal. Because yes, you are right that these 40% don't truly believe this. I don't think that they go at the end of the day and they're just like, oh, I just fucking hate these minorities. I think that they have actual frustrations in their life, and they were told who the scapegoat is, and they're pointing to them because they were told that person's a scapegoat. But that doesn't change the fact that they voted in that way, and they're pleading with their representatives to enact policies and change in that way. And we should grapple with the fact that that is what they are at least claiming politically to want. And I'm all in favor of this distinction that they don't truly want that, but that comes in how we have a conversation with these people and change their minds.
I want to give some. If you just briefly, because I want to give some spots to some space to Perry over there, but briefly.
This isn't necessarily a contention with what Staxium's just said, because I agree that like none of us would be here making this content in the way in which we do if there wasn't some form of understanding that we need to reprogram, change, edit the mindsets of these people. I don't necessarily think, as someone who has had multiple conversations with multiple different people, both on the internet, off the internet, at rallies, at protests, whatever, I don't necessarily think that having a conversation with these people, especially being a minority, is always the best way forward, because in many cases these people have, like, with them being programmed, a mental block, like, I'm just not going to listen to this minority because this black person or this trans person or this woman or whoever is beneath me by virtue of them just being who they are, and I am a white man or I am a black man, and so as a result, or just the fact that I'm a man, this person is beneath me because they do not look like me, they do not fit the description of something that I'm willing to respect. And it's for that reason that I think the left especially is going to have a lot more luck with deprogramming people by doing things like direct action, actual activism in the community, going down and talking to people, regardless of what their political view is. I've housed Trump supporters, I don't give a shit, okay? Like, I've housed people with fucking swastika tattoos. I don't give a shit. It's all about the cause and what we are trying to enact and what we are trying to the world that we are trying to create. So as a result, I think it's best for us to go to things like city council meetings. I think that what we need to do is, when some dumb soccer mom stands up on the fucking podium and says some shit about how a trans person is going to like kidnap her child in the night or whatever, I think the next lefty that steps up at that panel, at that platform or podium, is to go, hey, you're wrong. That's not correct. Because I think people are not used to being challenged openly in public. They're not. Like, they're used to being challenged on Facebook or in a TikTok comment section or YouTube comment section. Meet a motherfucker, like, pull up on somebody. Like, trust me, they're never ready for this shit when you actually pull up to them in public and say, okay, like,
this is a good example, though. This is a good example of why peaceful protest can be so effective, right? I think it's really, really dangerous. I'm going to actually pretty strongly disagree with you. Do you want to be called? I know your name is Ancom. Is that what you prefer? I just want to make sure that I'm not just calling you a label. Okay. So, right. You said, like, those in power want you to think nonviolence works. Nonviolence does work, right? And the idea that it has to be on the backdrop of violence, I don't know if I accept that premise, nor do I see evidence for that. So I'm going to point to a number of protests that we know were nonviolent and were highly successful. So to the paradigm shift, a lot of them are not going to be specifically located in America, but I don't think that we can't extrapolate from these things and say that nonviolence doesn't work, because in many ways, these were even more tyrannical systems that were being overthrown. So I'm going to just list a couple. Armenian 2018 revolution. It was a completely peaceful revolution. It completely threw off the Soviets that were over top of them. Completely peaceful. They stepped down, forced a revote. South Korea, 1987. They basically had a massive demonstration for the ruling government. It immediately implemented a democratic electoral system, and that has been the government that they have had. They did it in 19 days of mass protests. No violence, not even property damage was done at the same time. We've also got the Berlin Wall, 1989, right? When the Berlin Wall fell, it was vastly, exclusively peaceful protests that brought down the tearing down of this. Nonviolent revolution in the Power of the People, People Power Revolution, which happened in the Philippines. Again, completely nonviolent. It led to the complete removal of a dictator and the restoration of democracy in the Philippines. And so the idea that nonviolence doesn't work, I am not convinced of. There is empirical literature that shows this, that violence by protesters tends to make people unsympathetic towards your own movement.
Okay, I want if the paradigm shift or Ancom want to respond, but I want to give space to Perry too.
Perry, please take my time for a second, because I'm just writing down everything that's being said. You haven't spoke that much. I feel like that's unfair. Rocket, brother.
That's fine.
I mean, look, I think that we're dancing around some really key concepts of the issue. Like, one, if we want to talk about property damage, we can just look at Detroit. Detroit was destroyed in 1967, and the city has never recovered. We talk about white flight. That was on the back of quote unquote civil rights protests that turned into riots and completely gutted that city. Black people today are still feeling the effects of the economic destruction that happened in Detroit. And that is directly a result of violent political action. On the flip side, in 1967, Martin Luther King was meeting with presidents trying to push forward legislation. So I just don't think that the two can really be compared at all. I mean, I understand what people are saying. Sometimes violence does move needles, but I don't think that violence is necessary unless you're literally trying to overthrow some kind of corrupt regime, like 𝕖𝖓 said earlier. I also want to talk about we were talking about like trans issues and stuff like that, and I agree with, I'm sorry, Eli?
Yep.
I agree with Eli in the notion that like people don't necessarily think these, that they hear them from pundits, but we're also missing the fact that these things are reinforced like crazy on social media. Like, you get onto social media and you have any kind of contrary opinion and a Kasparian, you're going to get raked across the coals. And I don't even think that anything she says is that bad, that radical. It's just her opinion, right? If you don't want to be called a birthing person, I don't want to be called a person of color. I'd rather just be a Black American. No one's coming at me and calling me all types of bigots or whatever, because I don't want to be labeled as a person of color. So I just think that we're missing on some very key issues of how these movements kind of move people away from even seeing the empathy of what you're trying to do when you engage in like these kind of bullying tactics and this violent action.
I actually want to respond to that. First thing, I just want to get the whole Anna Kasparian thing out of the way. First off, I swear this is gonna be quick. So the thing about things like what's going on with Anna Kasparian, or what went on with Anna Kasparian, and part of the reason why she got dogpiled by a bunch of trans people on Twitter for having contention with birthing person, is that the fact of the matter is, all she had to say was that, hey, I would prefer it if you didn't call me a birthing person. That's it. If she said that, as a matter of fact, I responded to her saying that, and I saw a lot of people also saying similar things. That she didn't have to say that. All she had to say was, hey, please don't call me a birthing person. But she went all deep into it that she really didn't need to go into, and that's where the transphobia came from, or that's where people started, sniffing transphobia, because she went way deeper in this than what she needed to go. Same thing with you as well, with being called a person, with not wanting to be called a person of color. That's a boundary that you were setting, and you just stopped right there. You didn't go all the way, deep into that. You just said, hey, I don't want to be called a person of color. I just want to be called a black person, American, whatever you want to be called. And then my question for you also, what was your name again? I am terribly sorry. I'm bad with names. It's Perry. Sorry, thank you.
Yep.
My question for you is, so when you talked about Detroit and the stuff and the damages from the riots over there in Detroit, what about, all of the other damage that has happened to Black people at the hands of white people that the Black community is still reeling from to this day? From the several Black towns that are submerged underwater now because of white terrorism, from the several towns that where Black wealth was going to prosper and was prospering, that white people decided to burn down, loot, and pillage and take from. Like, that stuff that we're still experiencing, that our community is still reeling from today, because that was opportunity that was stolen from us. So talking about, the riots that happened in Detroit, I'm sorry, but like, compared to all the other shit, I don't really, as a Black person, I don't really give a shit about the
sure. I'll let you respond real quick, but before I do that, I gotta make some money. Okay, $2 from only Mr. Bill says, has anyone here been in a real life riot or civil disobedience? 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 Jr. for $10 says, deprogramming, edit the mindsets. The worst elements of the right use this language about the left as well. So does make you no better than them with how you strategize. So does that make you no better than them with how you strategize or view society?
No, because we're morally right. Fuck you.
$20 from Alexander
I'm gonna just
Rin.
let Ariana have that one, because that was true. Basically what I was going
to say. I'm joking, by the way, but I know you agree with that.
To say this, okay, but
I'm not religious.
No, let me make $20. Let me make $20. Then you all can have fun with it. Okay. Violence from Alexander Rin to say, violence is not a tool. Violence is an action and almost always widens the gap between people. Being above board and using peaceful means results in slower but sturdy steps that quickly become acceptable. Okay.
Actions are tools, so that first bit of the statement is nonsense.
Absolutely
Actions are tools.
Could I respond, because that was kind of a thing to me. Like, there are tons of, look, I 100% agree with everything that Erudite is fine. Yeah, Erudite said.
Yeah, Kyla, whatever.
Okay. I agree with everything that Kyla said about nonviolence, but we should also recognize that there are a ton of examples that we can use where violence works, right? We have some very obvious examples with like Civil War or American Revolution, or we could even go through like recent examples with like the Balkans in the Bosnian War, where we essentially bombed them and then they stopped genociding their own people. Like, there are times where violence is necessary, and it's good when it works and it's bad when it doesn't work. And I think that should be a really uncontentious, like a pretty, like something that we should all be agreeing with. And I think we should instead be engaging with
just
the question.
Stacks no, let me push back on this a little bit, right? So if you knew 100% that by going around and beating the shit out of everyone you disagreed with, even slightly, you could get them to change their mind, do you think that would be justified?
So I am going to engage with that hypothetical.
Yes.
The answer is yes. Yes.
No!
Yes. No!
Oh my God! I love Lenin. Stalin, baby, yes.
No. The difference with Stalin. No, Jesus Christ! I'm engaging with the hypothetical. The hypothetical is 100%.
Myself. Go. I want to hear what you got to say.
I'm engaging with the hypothetical, which the hypothetical you gave is I 100% know. I would never, ever say that in the real world, because the answer is in the real world, we 100% never know. I'm trying to engage with what you asked.
No, I guess it. So, but again, also, right?
I want to say,
wait, was the hypothetical to agree with you?
Yeah, to change. So,
to change
will-
people's
they will
perspectives
change
to agreeing
people's
with you.
minds.
They will
right?
100%
So
change
you
their
could-
mind. if
You
by
they
have
going
to
don't-
around-
assume that you're right. You have to
Yeah.
assume that
Right.
you are
Go around-
ontologically 100% right.
Yeah, so
Kyle,
again,
that's what
your
crazy over
positions
here.
that you have,
I
so
see what
you
you're saying.
think
Because yeah,
that-
I
if
see
it's
what you're
beating the
saying.
shit out of people to distill a utopia onto the planet, Jesus
Right.
comes down. Turns out he's always been black. Fuck you, white people. And he's like, I have the answer. And he's like, but we have to beat the shit out of 50% of the population. But I promise we'll get utopia. Then okay, yeah, sure. But the problem is, I'm not Jesus, and nobody else is. Nobody has like.
I just want to say
omniscient
that's what I'm
knowledge.
saying.
I want to say I want to say one thing, and that is that I feel like that premise is a dishonest premise.
I
because
agree.
because the thing is that like no one really is saying. I mean, there's like a few people that do that, but like it's like a handful that like don't even matter in the grand scheme of things. But and no, they shouldn't do that. For the record, I don't think we should just go around beating up everybody that disagrees with us. Okay, but I just want to say that like I just want to request, and I probably should have said this earlier at the beginning of the panel. Let's use hypotheticals, no offense, Wick, that are like actually in good faith and that could like actually be like that could actually pertain to what's going on. Because let's be honest, that's not what's happening in any of these protests that turn violent. It's not necessarily that people, you know, are going around and just, oh yeah, you're a white guy, I'm gonna just beat the shit out of you. Like I said, there's a small handful of you. I've seen those videos.
Well, let me make it more realistic for you.
Talking about these white,
Oh, could we not for a second?
but
We not what?
oh yeah, Paradigm. You said you had some. You said you had some shit.
Yeah, and then you guys asked 3 questions on top of that, answered the 3 questions, developed into another point, and then
You
Wick
gotta
brought
just-
up
you
3
gotta
questions.
shoehorn
The
yourself
paradigm,
in
go
there,
ahead.
fam.
Go
I didn't
ahead.
even get to respond.
So
You
that's
could-
that's 17 points. I have probably about 3 minutes to respond to it, but watch me work. Okay, let's start from the beginning of the clock. Eli, first rule: never ask another question on top of a question, because that makes us divulge away from it and makes us forget the premise. Nobody actually answered that Chatter's question that Wick asked. Like nobody did, and that was kind of crazy to me because I was like, are they listening or are they trying to make a point? Regardless of that, Erudite.
Wait, which question are you saying that we didn't answer?
Because there were 3 questions that
I'm
was answered.
bringing
by
it
the question.
back. You know I have the ability to remember all of this. It's my fucking sycophantic thing about me.
Go ahead.
Erudite. I'm gonna sing a song and then I'm gonna say 2 sentences to you, and that's gonna be my response to every single point you brought up. The song.
Whoa.
Why don't you ask the kids at Tiananmen Square? Was fashion the reason why they were there? Number 2. So how's that working for the Armenians now, by the way? Number 2, I hate to do this because this is super low ball.
3.
This is super low. The second sentence. Third point, second sentence. Follow me here. Let's not talk about what like South Korea and Germany do to their low and marginalized communities, because all that democracy and freedom led to what are we seeing now in Italy, Germany, and a few other places that I don't feel like mentioning, including Finland. Rise of the far right. So that's the thing. Let's go to the next point, and this will just address everybody, including the question, because I think I could just do this all really quickly. So we're all under the assumption that history does not exist here. The original question asked was, can somebody name me one tool that would be more potent than violence in this climate, in America specifically? Somebody said here, vote. I want to be I want to be friendly with this answer, but maybe I'm just not as plugged in online, but I could swear that voting got us to this conversation. The amount of things that I've heard missing from and okay, then that he will be the last person. So I am just responding to the other 3 panelists on the other side of this question. Fuck. The thing that we're missing here is this subtle. People needed to be told to treat black people with respect through an act. People did not come to that conclusion on their own. Therefore, Nixon's aides said out loud, yo, okay, we're passing the Civil Rights Act, these things is passing, shit like that. We got to be a little bit more covert with our racism. So now we're at a point where you're asking me to participate in a system that has been hiding that one fact, let alone thousands of different things from a general populace, and you think they're going to be informed enough to know, hey, trans rights are trans rights, this is on the ballot, this is on the ballot. They can barely focus on being able to pay for their fucking rent in an economy that is slowly grinding to a halt. Voting is not the straight solution, because direct action would be the straight solution, because it's clear that the government don't give a fuck about certain groups of people in society. This is just true.
They
Now,
would
to
never pass
walk,
the Civil Rights Act in
What-
the first place then.
What is
Now
the
to-
system that you suggest instead, though? If
now
you don't
to-
want us to vote,
I
what's the
wanna
system?
say-
no,
hold on,
no,
hold on.
no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to do that.
I do want to say one thing. I do
Yeah,
want to say
don't
one
engage
thing.
with him, Tyler.
No one's going to interrupt me
No,
because
wait,
I
hold
let
on.
y'all all delve down, and I can't. I
Finish your
wrote
thought,
down,
Paradigm.
and
Finish your
thank
plot,
you.
and we'll get into it.
Jesus
They'll
I'll ask
all,
you after.
Leads us to the-
they'll all
which
ask
leads
you
us to
after.
the-
They all have questions
Which-
for you, sir.
That's so fine, but this should answer them all. Which leads us to the third point up there. As I said earlier in the beginning of this, there were 18 specific violent uprisings that caused Lyndon B. Johnson to feel pressured to sign the Civil Rights Act. There was a codifying rule inside of the Civil Rights Act that could undo it by basically telling it's the same clause in it that exists in the 13th Amendment, which can be used as a parallel to prison and the over-policing of certain communities. What I mean to say by all of that is, if you think nonviolence works, then that means you have to figure out a way to disarm the state of its violence towards nonviolence. They are the ones who are intolerant. They are the ones who set up this group of actions that need to be followed. If it was so easy for us to just talk this out, then people wouldn't live stream mass shootings. If it were that easy for us to talk this out, then we would have so many systems in place that would stop us from ever needing to even discuss, yo, they shot my boy, and it was clearly, we debated Kyle Rittenhouse, we debated Herman Cain's death due to COVID, we debated if COVID was real when Trump got it, we debated whether Joe Biden was going to rise us up or just be, we debate these things, but the real life effect is nothing has moved, period. Because we're still having this conversation. If it were easy enough to turn people's heads by having the conversation, then 𝕵𝖎𝖎 should be the most popular person on the planet right now. Because people still think weird shit. So maybe, just maybe, if they're so close-minded that they already think that trans people are coming to groom your kids, hey,
We gotta.
you laid your bet.
Okay, we
That's
got
my
we got
answer.
to get some more people in here. We do.
Facts.
So
I'd
I
love
want to
to
get
go.
Perry, Erudite, Staxiums, Ancom, and then Eli.
About the property damage and the economic destruction of Black Americans, I am against violent political actions. So I think that those are also equally as bad, and we're still dealing with the ramifications of them today, which is why Black and white race relations are in the shitter, because people keep talking and reminiscing and bringing up the things of the past instead of trying to work together towards a collective future. That is one of the core concepts that was lost after the death of Martin Luther King. And I want to go over this because I feel like we keep using the word nonviolence, but there are actually 6 core tenets to nonviolence that Martin Luther King used to follow. And I'm just going to go over those real quick, and then I'll give over the time to somebody else. Number 1 is nonviolence resists evil without resorting to violence. 2, nonviolence seeks understanding and friendship, not humiliation. 3, nonviolence opposes evil itself, not individuals committing acts of evil. 4, nonviolence resistors endure suffering without retaliation, recognizing its redemptive power. 5, nonviolence resists. I'm sorry, I typed this all weird. Nonviolence resistance avoids physical and internal violence, refusing to hate opponents. And number 6 is nonviolence resistors maintain a deep faith in a just future. I think under those 6 tenets, I wouldn't classify pretty much any modern political movement as nonviolent. But I'll yield my time to somebody else.
I do want to. Can I respond to that? Because I feel like that was a response to me.
It's fine. Go.
Okay.
Since it's a response.
I just want to say the reason why I brought up the other things was because the first thing that you said, Perry, was the stuff about Detroit. because I guess I'm assuming that like that was a protest or a demonstration that happened where black people, I guess,
It was a destruction of
ruined
black wealth by black Americans. Yeah.
by black. Okay, yeah. So you brought that up. That was the first thing that you brought up, but like you didn't bring up the other things that I brought up, which I would argue are the things that led to that thing happening in Detroit. I also just hate the fact that this conversation is most likely going to start centering around Dr. Martin Luther King. I think it's incredibly pointless to center this conversation around Dr. Martin Luther King or really the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act. And here are the reasons why. First off, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and he was the nonviolent one. He was the peaceful one, and they still shot him for it. The FBI shot that motherfucker. Not only did they shoot him, but also when he died, he had an approval rating of under 40%. He was known as he was known as the most hated man in America. And the reason, and this was among both black and white people, not just white people, but also black people as well, because there were a lot of black people who looked at, and these people still exist today, that looked at people like Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and said, why are you rocking the boat? It's just going to be best for us if we just try to navigate the system of white supremacy and just try to, you know, who gives a shit if another black brother gets gunned down on the street? He wasn't hiding well enough or some shit like that, right? Like he was one of the most he was the most hated man in America when he died, and I would argue that we still have not caught up to him and his vision to this day. I don't know if it was asked in the opening, but I know that the original prompt that was sent to us in the chat was the civil rights movement effective? I would say in symbolism, yes. In all actuality, no, because, and this is probably going to get a lot of people angry. Get ready for them super chats, Wick. I'm gonna expect my cut, but black people didn't receive reparations. And I think that should have been, and I think that was, if I remember correctly, one of the goals of the civil rights movement. Also, the Civil Rights Act being passed. Oh well, black people are still gunned down in the street by cops for no fucking reason. Not only that, but there's still shit like redlining still going on, even though the practice in and of itself is illegal. It's still going on. Not only is redlining still going on, you still have shit like where houses that are being sold by black people are offered at less of a less value than white households or white houses of similar caliber and similar stature. That's just a few things.
Okay,
just
if I could
Erudite,
jump
go
in?
ahead, and then I got some super chats.
Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement did not end racism, and
Of course.
it didn't end.
No one's saying it is.
Okay.
That wasn't
Okay.
the goal, though.
Okay, to say that the civil rights
That's how
movement
people act, though.
isn't effective and basically
one on the
amounted
panel.
to nothing is a terrible argument. You're right.
Ahistorical.
There is
think
still
it's
racism.
terrible.
Hold on. Would everyone on the panel agree that there is still like deep racism within the states that absolutely need to be addressed, that there are systemic issues within policing and whatnot? Does everyone agree with that?
Yes, but I
I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure.
Well,
if
yeah, I
everyone
just want
agrees
to
with that.
clarify that what I said
Sure.
was that in a symbolistic way, the Civil Rights Act sort of worked in a symbolistic way. But
like the
there's
fact that
never
all of
any
us are
material
sitting
change.
here.
Ending segregation was
The fact that-
symbolic because
yeah.
we still have racism still
yeah.
No,
exists.
do you think there were any material
we ended some
changes?
really stupid
material
we
changes?
ended
Hold on.
we ended the really stupid law of separate people by color. Amazing strides.
Are you kidding?
You
Are
wanna
you-
be frustrated
are you
that
kidding me?
we're not 100%
Okay,
Hey,
hold
aligned.
on, hold on.
one at a time,
Hold
one
on.
at a time, one at a time,
Go
one at a
to,
time, one at a time.
nationally accredited or institutions, allowing them to go to universities, allowing them to run for office,
And then,
paving the way for
then
Barack Obama to become president.
and then the race part of affirmative action was
Is this about
just
non-violence or
No,
non-violence, or is
it's
this
not
just about black
100%.
grievances?
Eli, we
Okay.
all know it's not 100%. No one is
Like,
arguing that it is perfect
I'm saying-
and that
I'm saying
we don't
as
have
I-
work to go.
You say
like,
you say
we
you didn't
have
want
to
the
acknowledge-
conversation to revolve around
Okay,
MLK.
I'm just
You
going
were
to say it.
talking
I'm going to
about
say
race
it from my
grievances.
chest. If you don't think that 100% of what you want in the world, which I agree with a lot of what you're asking for, except for reparations, which I'm pretty sure you're not surprised by, if you think that just not appreciating major historical wins, despite there still being lots of work to do, if you don't appreciate that at all, it's baby shit. It's actual baby shit. It is
I feel
fucking
very
important.
disrespected. I feel
That's
very
fine.
disrespected that you, a white woman from
It's not about
Canada,
race.
is going to.
Well, I'm going to agree with her.
We're having this conversation.
Black man
Backbone,
from East
the
Coast.
All right, I want to cut in here real
the
quick.
backbone of this conversation is about
Eli?
race. It is about racism. Like you want to say, oh yeah, segregation. That was any segregation. That was such a grand thing. Honestly, no, the fuck it wasn't. It was a bare minimum.
Okay.
It was a bare minimum.
Okay.
It was a bare.
I want to. Hey! Ancom wants the floor for a little bit. He hasn't spoken in a
Just
while.
wanted to cut in for a second because the entire point that Eli was making, and now everyone seems to have forgotten the original point, is that the actions undertaken to get the Civil Rights Act and similar wins during the Civil Rights Movement, the question is, were they effective? And so that requires us to analyze the actual Civil Rights Act itself and the other legal wins that were gained as a result of that, and see if those were effective in achieving the aims of the Civil Rights Movement. So the fact that he is pointing out, and I agree with him, that those aims were not even close to being adequately achieved by that movement, which is given as the, largely the hallmark of nonviolent resistance, tells me that no, it wasn't fucking effective. It gained small legal wins. It gained some symbolic wins.
Let me ask you then.
But
Hold
on. Let me finish my statement.
Please.
In the actual goal of trying to achieve the sort of equality that Martin Luther King proposed in his speeches, it hasn't gotten anywhere close to those goals. So was nonviolence effective? I don't think it was.
I just want to say that my child is by a white woman, and no one dragged me off to jail. No one hung me. No one did anything like that to me.
I'm married to a white woman, dog. I'm like,
Okay.
okay.
No, but
Just stop. Okay. Enough. Stop.
What are you gonna say next? That ending slavery was a major strive?
Okay. Yes.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Okay. Let me. Order in the court.
can't.
Order in the court. Let me. I have 2 super chats. Let me read them real quick, and then I have a question for Ancom, Eli, and maybe the Paradigm Shift. I'm not sure where he stands here. Aircraft Sparky for $5 says Ancom says violence against judges is fine, so he endorses burning crosses in front of yards of both Justice Jackson and Justice Thomas. I don't think Ancom said that. I think Eli said that.
It wasn't me who said that.
Pretty sure that's not true. But I don't know.
I mean, I'm
Nicholas,
crosses, but like, you
yeah,
know.
Nicholas
That's
Johansson.
that's it.
If their house gets TP'd or their window gets broken, who gives a shit?
Nicholas
I'm sorry.
Johansson says, for 65 SEK, human psychology indicates that violence leads to more hate and fear on the other side. It doesn't win anyone over. Be a thought leader, not an insurgent. And my question. So, do you think that the year of our Lord, 2023, is no better for minorities in America than the year of our Lord, 1963? Do you actually believe this?
I would say that the ways in which they are better are barely noticeable and are not necessarily things that we should be celebrating. We need to keep pushing for equality and not accept pity points, not accept scraps from the table. We're better than that as people.
Okay, calling
Wait, can I-
slavery
raising my-
ending scraps from the table
That
is
wasn't
like
part of the question.
so
That wasn't-
wildly.
in the first
that-
place.
that
I
wasn't
agree.
part of
Of course.
I agree,
That
but
wasn't
the
part of it.
ending of
Never
it.
sold them into slavery. Like,
I agree. Hold on. Everyone agrees slavery is bad. The issue is ending slavery is monumental because if it hadn't been ended, even though it should have never started, means what? We would have a country that still has slavery going on? Are you kidding
Let's
me?
be clear here.
Wait, hold
the
on,
ending
hold
of
on. Can I
slavery
go?
is not part of this conversation because
He
that
brought
took
it up.
a huge amount of that took a huge amount of violence to accomplish.
Of course.
Okay, I guess
No.
I guess tell Eli Monty to never bring up this.
Wait,
I don't know what to say. I didn't bring up slavery.
I'm gonna go ahead and just.
Enough. I want to give. I know you want to go, Staxiums. I know, and you'll go next. But I want to give some space to the Paradigm Shift, because he's been trying to get into in his less verbose way. Go ahead.
Yeah. So.
Floor is yours, sir.
So we're gonna try this. We're gonna dial down the passion a little bit. I I have a penchant to like, I don't know if it's just the way I am as a human being. I like listening to people. Moreover, I like paying attention to what they say because I feel like a lot of people when they talk, especially in the real world, like a lot of people don't be listening because people they don't have the skill to listen. That's just who we are right now. That's my friends, you know. People be talking and you be like, yeah, I hear you. Okay. So I believe that the question that you asked, Wick, is a bad faith question. It's meant to incite certain feeling, and this isn't your fault. It's just you're the one asking it. So it lends me to kind of want to scratch below the surface there, if you don't mind. So when you ask the question of is life better for minorities in 2023, the answer is obviously yes. The answer is obviously yes. But the question is for how far does that push? Because as we are seeing it now, we are currently trying to buy every Democratic candidate versus a form of fascism. We've all agreed on that because that's the playbook that they're using. Like they said it out of their mouths. They're following people who call themselves theocratic fascists. They're following people who call themselves right-wing provocateurs. And this goes back to the Anna thing, and that's why I didn't want to even talk about it. Anna's whole gripe is over a story that ain't even real. Like, you could look it up on the internet and you'll find it within 3 minutes. It's a link to one article that mentioned one thing somebody in the UK said. Like, who gives a shit? The grievances that these larger political commentators have are quite literally because there's nobody in their corner. And I have a lot of people in my corner. So I'm going to assume that when you say, is life better? Do you mean as in the amount of physical harm that can be done to me or I am limited from? Do I have freedom in this country to move? Well, based on I don't know, the whole reason the Black Lives Matter movement started, all the way back to Ferguson, all the way back to Trayvon Martin, because a sentence that comes out of kids' mouths these days are, I could be the next Mike Brown or Trayvon. If that fear is so present that in my community, around my people, we always know that's an end result that could happen to us and nobody will give a fuck. That's just a tiny bit better than knowing there is an active group that is legislated that is allowed to do, oh, wait a minute. There is a group that's legislated that's paid for tax dollars to do that.
Let me ask.
We don't view them that way.
So how do you feel about white people that live in inner cities that are deathly in fear that they're going to get robbed by young black men?
Yet again, another bad faith question.
It's not.
No,
how's it a bad faith question?
Because when you asked me a question,
Stop! Everyone, stop!
I got you.
Just real quick, stop! I want to reset this. He asked a question. You said it was bad faith. I want Perry and 𝕵𝖎𝖙 to go back and forth on this because I'm curious, right? You have very different perspectives here. And I want to know, right, what 𝕵𝖎𝖙's perspective is and what Perry's perspective is. So please.
And then I got something.
And
we'll
get you.
You asked me the question if life has gotten better for minorities. Oh, did my camera die?
We just lost your camera.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. It'll come back. It's just overheating because it's wrapped around the pillow. Yeah, we gotta take off.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
The professional ass camera.
Okay. In the meantime.
Yes. No. I can continue. I'm sorry. I can continue.
Okay.
So it's a bad faith question because Wick asked me if life had gotten any better for me. I'm just gonna keep going. Wick asked if life had gotten any better for minorities in the year of our Lord 2023. I said I can draw parallels between how life was before things like the Civil Rights Act, before we started getting the more progressive voices, before we started listening to minorities a bare bit more. I can say, yeah, life got better. I'm not worried about a Klansman coming down to shoot me. But I can draw a parallel between another force that is state sanctioned that can also do that. You then asked me, how do I feel about white people who are afraid of black people walking down the street when it's quiet? I don't see what that has to do with what I
Yeah,
answered. Not
literally.
even the question that was asked of me. What I
Can I
answered.
explain myself?
So
Yeah,
you can, but I'm also just going to let you know I would not like to answer the question. I think that's within my range.
okay.
So you're not open to change your mind, like I said.
Just
at the
real
beginning
quick,
of the
just real quick,
conversation.
just real quick.
I can answer the
I'm
question.
gonna explain my-
Stop,
I'm
stop,
gonna
stop, stop.
explain
I want to
myself
explain
prepared.
Can we
myself.
have
I want to
Yeah,
explain
can we
go
have
ahead,
myself.
Perry
Explain
and
that. I
Paradigm
can
go
answer
back
the
and forth?
I do want to, but I will explain myself real quick, right? Because Perry's next. First of all, Perry is next. But the reason I asked the question, and the reason why the question is important, because if we can acknowledge that there was substantive change that was made during the civil rights movement from 1963 to 2023, the next question becomes, how was that change enacted? Because we can both agree that we need more change. And so, given that this has worked before, history is a thing, right? We can see, okay, what tactics and what ways can we use to enact further change down the road? And that is the whole point of the question. It's not to say, you have enough, shut up. That's not my point. My point is, what has worked before can perhaps work again. But I want Perry to go. Go ahead, Perry.
All right, so the reason that I brought up the thing about white Americans is because I keep hearing a lot of this stuff that these big legislations, these life-changing, these once-in-a-lifetime legislations that have been passed for Black Americans haven't improved our living conditions on a day-to-day basis, when every single individual of every single group in this country is at threat of violence, whether it's from the police, whether it's from one another, whether it's from state actors, whether it's from whatever. They literally just passed an Asian hate bill because guess what? Asians were facing a lot of hate from who? Specifically, young Black American men. I know that the truth is uncomfortable, and I hate to talk about it myself because I also am a Black man, but if we don't talk about these conversations in between ourselves, specifically as a community, we're never going to be able to improve the thing. We're never going to be able to improve the issues that we have. So I just don't understand why everybody's freaking out when all I did was just ask a simple question, right? If we're going to talk about the substantive fears that Black men face every single day, then we also need to rope in the rest of the country that faces the same level of fear for different events. Look, white people are afraid of Black people in inner cities. Sometimes when I go to New York, I be seeing some sketchy motherfuckers and I'm like, bro, I need to get on the other side of the street from this nigga. So I just don't understand what the big pushback is. But I mean, Paradigm
Okay,
Shift isn't going to go back and forth.
So you said there was pushback. How many? Maybe I'm crazy. Everybody else could fill me in here, but I think saying no, I would not like to answer a question is not that much pushback. But besides that, just conversations, people talking, things like that. So you mentioned.
Do you want me to take over this question?
Could you please? Thank you.
I can answer a stupid question. Okay.
Thank you.
So why do you feel? I mean, you can laugh, but why do you feel that these people have these fears about Black people?
Because
when they're walking down the
young
street?
Black men are one of the most violent demographics in the country.
Where do you have a statistic to back that up?
Do I really have to pull statistics for that?
Yes, I would like you
Are
to
you
pull
gonna
statistics for that.
be that? Okay.
I would like you to pull a legitimate
You guys
statistic
can
for that.
continue.
But my
Okay.
question, so my question is, okay, you know what? Yes, I want you to pull the statistic, but I think I want to go ahead and bite the bullet here and assume that you are correct, right? That Black men are so violent. Why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with economic standards. I also think that it has to do something that has
Economic
to do
standards
more
like what?
specifically with our culture.
Economic standards. Okay.
Can I finish the question? Can I finish
I don't
the
know, because
question?
you might spew some more anti-Black propaganda, but continue.
Anti-Black propaganda. This is a fucking joke, man.
Just continue. You do not need to laugh and make a joke. Just continue if you are serious about this, because I'm being serious. So I would like it if you were
not.
also.
You just asked me if Black men are violent.
I am being serious.
That's the most unserious thing you could ask.
You just did not like the question I asked, much like how I didn't like the question you asked. But I am maintaining this level of civility and this level of seriousness. So please explain to me. I want you to explain two things. I heard the culture thing too. I want you to explain to me what culture is, and then I want you to explain to me why it is that you think that what has led to the economic conditions that might lead to Black people being so violent.
There are a number of factors that lead to economic conditions that cause all groups of people to become violent, not just Black Americans. You see it in poor white communities as well, just not as high a rate.
Specifically Black
Let
Americans.
you got to give him. Hey, he might be getting there.
Wait,
Stop. Let him get there.
What you want me to do is you want me to sit here and circle jerk and talk about, oh my God, redlining destroyed us. Oh my God.
Since you clearly want to feel some anti-Blackness,
oh my God.
to specifically
anti-Black. Can you first tell me what I said that's anti-Black? First tell me what I said that's anti-Black.
So I need you to go ahead and explain. Don't go off on like, well, what are these other groups?
Tell me what I said that's anti-Black.
I asked you specifically for the reason why you think Black people are so violent. Now you're scrambling to find a statistic. Fine. I'm asking you. Well, I don't. Let me check Discord. Did you drop it in the chat yet?
You got. First of all, stop, everyone. No, stop. I'm serious.
Anyway,
stop, or you will be stopped. Please, I have to bring order to this court. And Eli, you can respond to him, but you gotta let him answer the question. He's not able.
Supremacy and just get the fuck away with it, Wick. I can't let that slide. Sorry.
He's prefacing the answer to his question.
I
want to know the answer too. I want to know the answer too. But you gotta let him do it, and then you can respond and you can dumpster him. Cool? Go ahead, Perry.
Oh man. Okay, so there's a multivariate to the economic factors that affect young Black men. Some of it is fatherlessness in the homes. Some of it is historical. Some of it is systemic. Some of it is the fact that Black people happen to be the highest consumers in the entire country. We spend the most money on entertainment, on fashion, on makeup, on hair for Black women. They do tons of things like that. So some of them are systemic outside of us, and some of them are our own fault that we need to sit down and we need to come together and start making better decisions and start changing our culture to do different things when we get to money. The Black culture, I'm not sure that the economic cap that the Black culture has off the top of my head, but it's fucking huge. And I know that the Black dollar is gone by the next day after people get paid. These are all statistics that you can go and look up. You can go look them up on blackdemographics.com. Black statistics made by Black people for Black people, or curated, I should say. They don't make the statistics themselves. And this question about are Black men violent, when are we just going to bite the bullet and talk about what's the name? We always want to bring up, I'm trying to think of the word. We always want to bring up the per capita stats when it comes to police shootings. When are we ever going to bite the bullet and talk about the per capita stats for Black male aggressive crime? Okay. Is that white supremacist?
Do you want to talk about all those things? Because I got an answer for pretty much everything that you just said.
No, do not do that, because that is a 1350 dog whistle.
No, wait, come on.
I know he's engaging at 1350, but I can't just let this. I can't just let this slide here.
I don't even know what that means.
We could also, as a suggestion, we could rerail to talking about like protests in general. But if you guys want to like talk about all of this, we can. But
I think that we should go back to the actual topic, because all we're doing is sitting here.
Yeah. We should go back to the actual topic before I bend you over my fucking knee. Yeah, we should go back to the actual.
See what you're gonna say. Black people are so
Go ahead.
Can
I just pop in real quick?
No, you can't pop in real quick. I know.
Okay.
Perry, what do you think? What is culture? What is culture, Perry? Answer that to me. Answer me that question. What is culture?
What do you think culture is?
What do you think culture is?
Okay. Stop. You're all just gonna ask each other what's culture over and over again. Well, okay, I'm throwing the flag.
Make him answer the fucking question, Wick. Make him answer the question.
It's such a big broad question.
That's such a broad question. Culture.
It's like, what is a woman? It's like these definitions.
Culture is such a wide-grossing topic. What specifically about the culture do you want to talk about?
Right,
I'd rather talk about that.
So
my answer to that question, the music.
My answer to the question.
About the movies that we make. Why don't we talk about the fact that we've all seen Boys in the Hood growing up? Why don't we talk about that? Let's just have an honest conversation instead of sitting here acting like you don't know what the fuck goes on in the Black community.
All that stuff, right? It's the Black experience. The culture is shaped by a group's response to environmental stimuli. So if your environmental stimuli for the good portion of the time that you've been in a fucking country has been since the day that country was founded, acts of violence have been done against you, I don't think it's fair to look at this group of people and say their culture is the problem when that is their response to this environmental stimuli. I also think that this ropes back to what somebody else said earlier about violence and hate just begetting more violence and hate. This conversation,
that would be Martin Luther King, by the way.
This conversation, in my honest to God opinion, is not a fair conversation because what we're talking about regulating is the response to violence that is already present and that is already there. The system in and of itself, all of the shit that happens to minorities, poor and working class people, it's all violence. The system in and of itself, by default, is a violent system against its own people. So
I'm glad you said that.
To sit here and then say that, oh well, we just don't think that like violence is bad or violence is needed against for a movement to be successful. I don't think it's fair to say that when the very thing that we are fighting against is violence against us. We didn't start this shit. Dare I even say we didn't start the fucking fire? It was already there. We're just reacting to it.
Okay, now that we're back, stop. Now that we're actually back on topic, and thank you for re-railing us a little bit. I do appreciate that, Eli. Let's talk about that. And the question, is simply this, right? And it is a valid question. If someone is doing violence to you, does that give you, justification to do violence back, and to what extent?
Can I clarify that question? Do you mean in the scope of are you talking about self-defense?
No, I'm not talking self-defense. I'm talking about in movements.
So so
not
obviously everyone
level,
has everyone has the right to self-defense, right? Every single non-violent advocate is going to agree with that. In the case of protest, though, however, having violence done to you is an extremely effective way at getting the public on your side, right? Not that I'm saying you should incite violence against you, but the sit-in luncheons, for example, where they went in and got harassed for hours and hours and hours and hours on end, and it was extremely violent, that led to most of the nation watching this, seeing it, and being appalled, right? Non-violence, peaceful protests are very, very, very effective at causing people to sympathize with you. We see this time and time again, and there is robust research also showing this, that nonviolent protest is more effective at communicating the grievance to the broader public and getting the broader public on your side, which means better access to lobbying, it means better access to voter blocks, it means better access to all of the people that we need to collectivize together to enact changes in democratic countries.
Can I respond? Great. So, a few things that I kind of want to address. What was that, Wick?
No, it's never mind. Go. It's your turn.
Okay, sorry. So, a few things that I want to address. I think we're kind of engaging a little bit with an is-ought fallacy. If you're not familiar with that, essentially, I think that there's a huge distinction that I want to place between what we should expect from people and what I don't know how to make this distinction. Basically, we should not be surprised when a minority group who has been targeted and harassed and marginalized for essentially the entire history of the country and even before then. We should not be surprised when they engage in violence or riots or protests that get dangerous. We shouldn't be surprised by that. But I think that there is a separate conversation couched in that where we're saying, okay, gotcha. Now that we're not surprised by that reaction, how should we encourage them to behave? We should expect them, or we shouldn't be surprised that they engage in this violence, but we should say they shouldn't. And I think that distinction matters. I, of course, understand. Yeah, I guess I'm saying I totally understand that there is a history of marginalization and destructive tendencies. And there is a reason why the Black community looks the way that it does. And I'll bite the bullet as well and say, yeah, you know what? They might engage in more crime. I wonder why the fuck that is, okay? It's because they have been pushed into poverty. And it is no fucking wonder that redline communities who have been absolutely outsourced from all resources start engaging in illicit and illegal activities, because that's the only method that they have. We should not be surprised by that, but we can also expect them to be better.
So I would just agree with everything that you're saying, right? I think that that the distinction that you make there is really valuable, right? When riots occur, there is a level of understanding. Really important to point out in the BLM protests, most of the riots that occurred weren't typically by major BLM activists and leaders. In fact, there was lots of BLM actors walking around encouraging people to stop doing it. It was usually opportunists that rolled up and utilized this as an opportunity for looting, which is awful, which is why, by the way, anyone supporting protests should maintain denouncing violence in these cases, because it absolutely would have made people increasingly sympathetic to like the BLM protests, which were broadly like decently successful. I would say most people have a somewhat positive regard towards it. And so I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying. What's really important to talk about is what my view is, what is politically effective? Because I agree with the systemic issues. I agree that Black bodies are targeted more often. I agree that there is massive policing issues, and there are systemic issues that affect Black people in America more than anybody else. The question is, what is going to be effective to the means of change?
Yeah. And I'll agree that I do think that at this point in time,
the paradigm, please.
Yeah.
Yo, the next person I want to reply to this is either Eli or Ancom, because I get it, but like y'all be responding to each other, and then every time we talk, you separate us, and like I don't know if that's a thing like conversation wise that you never been in the scythe before, but like that's anyway. We're gonna try this the other way. You're asking a lot of the optic responsibility of people who watched like the incident that sparked those events, like the incident that really kicked BLM off into like the spring-ish, was the thing that should have made people say, yeah, this is fucked up. But in today's society, every 3 days they'll post a video and say, do you want to live in America like this? Showing them the events doesn't work. Protesting any type of way they don't like doesn't work, because the thing that's happening is the thing we're protesting against, and it keeps happening. So it's got to be a one-on-one comparison here. So if seeing somebody get their neck knelt on could spark two separate sides of the conversation, which led to somebody, we're going to name drop him here, Steven Crowder, reenacting that and saying, this doesn't seem so bad. If we could get that in today's day and age, can we apply the same methods from before and use it to work the same way? Because we're doing that. It's our responsibility to not respond to the violence brought upon us because we need to sympathize with you. In other words, even though we ended slavery, we still need you to do something for us, white people, is how all of that comes off. Now, I don't know if that's because you're thinking about it empirically, but I need to remind you that there are real people behind the empirical status that you're bringing up. Kamala Harris said, we passed the first gun control law in 30 years, but we need to do more. Okay, there's your incrementalism. We are at a boiling point in America where incrementalism does not work anymore, because that's what led to the people getting more angsty and saying we need to find more targets. Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles should have been extradited from the country. There should be a manhunt for them motherfuckers right now.
Yeah.
But instead, nothing happened to them. Nothing happened to them. There is no core point inside of any of the us being nice to protests, us being nice during protests, us engaging in sit-ins. The point is, there is a problem where you intrinsically have sets of systems built up to protect people who want to do harm to others. And they protect white people generally the most.
How do you...
They protect the affluent and rich the most.
How do you suggest, other than... And I want Ancom to go next. Ancom is
But
next,
yeah, no,
but
ask the question. I appreciate it. That was the end, yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for you. So Given that you are against kind of this incrementalist approach, right, or voting and things like that in general, you say it's not effective and things like that. What is your solution to dismantle these systems? Like, how
Violent
do
revolution.
you want to go about dismantling
Okay,
the
I got
systems that
a
exist?
3-step plan. First, you got to inject. You have to inject equity in the poor neighborhoods. I've always talked about it as the TPA. I already forgot what it stood for because I smoked too much already. But it's called the TPA. I've said it on stream before. Basic case in point. Equity to public housing. If you live in an apartment if you live in an apartment or if you live in a house in a low cost, low income neighborhood, after 10, 15, 20 years, you start to accrue interest because the bank has already paid off the loan for it. You start receiving money back for that. Let's start recycling some of the worth that we put into the neighborhood. Second part, jobs, revitalizing every single, I mean, as many as we can, poor neighborhoods with government subsidy jobs. Hire the people inside the neighborhood, train them on the skills, bring people in. Let's get, I'm not, this is where I'm being facetious, but let's get FEMA in there. Let's get all the experts. Let's get everybody. Train these people on how to improve their housing, how to improve plumbing, get them jobs, government subsidized jobs, get them money to improve their own neighborhood, make it look better. We can move people out of certain districts, put them up in the expensive housing that's not even being used, and we can start shuffling and rebuilding and tearing down the terrible ass projects that we have, the terrible ass rundown houses that we have, build up some new stuff. Yes, we're talking about barn, what is it? It's like barn building, you know what the people be doing. Anyway, third step.
Oh, you're talking about a barn raising where everyone.
Thank you, barn raising. Thank you. Yeah. That was it. Third way. We have to start putting more democratic, more populist voices that understand from a ground perspective what's actually happening to the citizens of the country in positions where they have media power. Right now, the economy is kind of overrun by people who have this distant, like, view of every single poor person they've ever run into. Oh my God, he's homeless and dirty. If we had people with more empathy, people who actually lived in these places, I just say it, make better people famous is my last goal.
Okay.
But that's a pipe dream of society. That's my
Can I respectfully say that you didn't listen or answer Wick's question at all, Paradigm? What you essentially did was describe your utopia instead of acknowledge the methods that get you there. And that is what we're discussing. I literally
explained legislation.
You just said you want to get it passed, but not how you get there. That's the whole discussion. If we want to talk about rebuilding neighborhoods, I'm on your side.
Okay, dude, we are all Twitch streamers and TikTokers. Do not ask me to ask how I would do it because I ran for office. I can tell you the people you need to talk to. You need me to name drop people? No, right? True. Like, can we just be free on the idea that a utopia is not 3 bills? And 2 bills, actually. One of which is...
Hold on.
Nobody's saying any of this.
You've been shitting on us for not listening to you, and you didn't listen to me at all.
I just want to say...
Because you just said something random. Like, he asked me, how would I fix this? I gave you 3 ideas that could be passed.
No, you gave 3 policies, not how we enact them.
You gave 3 policies. You gave 3 specific policies, which, by the way, your policies are kind of base. I like a lot of those policies.
I want to say that the way in which I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier about how we achieve this,
sorry,
and that is by like, you know, things like class solidarity, banding together, and, you know, I think we should go out. I think the left needs to go out to things like city council meetings more and speak there, hold more public events and what have you. I think that's we first have to build a sort of community or some sort of coalition, some sort of
yes. Violence isn't going to do that. That's what we're saying.
Oh my God. Okay.
I'm so sorry, Ancom. I really want to toss it. I'm so sorry.
Violence will most likely come at some point later because we are going to probably have to. We're let's be honest with the way in which the Republicans are mobilizing. They're crazy people. It's gonna come later. But
maybe yes.
I don't even think it's maybe.
No. Hold on. I fucking pray it's a maybe. Okay, I pray
Yeah,
it's a
but
maybe.
I've
At
seen
the end,
people
hold on.
go kinda
At the end of the
crazy.
day, what you're talking about is like major violent
But-
revolution, and I agree it might be required. Right? Ukraine is a good example who utilized multiple peaceful protests over and over and over again, and then Russia steamrolled and said "fuck you," which is why they're at war. But at the end of the day, violence is a big fucking deal. It's not a small thing. We're talking about people's fathers and brothers and sisters dying. Right? We're talking about people being maimed in a country that has no fucking healthcare. Violence is a serious step. So I agree, we might have to go there, which is why I said violence is sometimes necessary, but we should exhaust every other option before then. Absolutely.
I mean,
And I think that what Eli is trying to say out of his mouth is that we've exhausted every other option.
Hey, hold
You
on.
haven't.
So,
Could I? Wait, hold on.
So I
I'd like to
really
go.
do think so.
So
Ancom, go
violent
ahead.
revolution. Okay.
Ancom.
Alright,
Nobody
alright.
said that.
Ancom,
You
I
are
gotta-
just
That's
putting
the
words
other
in my mouth.
option. We said if you exhaust all other options, you're only left with violent. I'm so sorry, Ancom. I'm fucking sorry. You're only
Oh,
left with violent revolution.
Okay, so the question
Alright.
is, so that's actually Eli's point. Holy
I won't
shit.
respond. I promise.
Paradigm, can we
That's-
listen to Ancom? I feel like if we want to have a conversation, we should listen.
Okay, I'm definitely not going to take that right now. I'm muting him because wow, don't do that.
I don't think you can
Ancom,
mute other
God.
You can't
panelists.
mute me. That's Wick's.
I'm muting
Paradigm,
him in
please
my ear.
finish.
Jesus Christ, I'm muting Erudite as well. Ancom, please.
Paradigm, feel free to finish what you're saying. I'm
Thank
not
you.
a person who tries to interrupt other people. I just want to get my point in at some stage.
Right, and that's why we set this up. I'm bringing up the thing, so I'm sure this is where you were about to go because this is the idea we had. That's Eli's point.
So toss it to
Eli's
Ancom.
point is quite
Okay.
simply
He can't hear me, so.
that when exhausting all other options, you're still.
Are you
asking
serious,
us
Wick?
to be
Come on.
nonviolent.
This is ridiculous.
You're asking
It
us,
is kind
you're giving us the key. You're saying this is what you need to get what you want. But you've agreed with us that we've exhausted all other options.
Were you
Paradigm.
listening when I read the 6 Tenements of Nonviolence from Martin Luther
okay.
King?
Point of order.
Hold on.
Point of
hold
order.
on,
Stop,
wait,
stop,
wait,
stop, stop. Everyone, God damn it. Please.
Okay,
Point of
after
order.
Ancom, I
You
have something
can't
to
stop.
for that.
Okay, fuck. We can't have people muting other panelists. I understand that you don't like when they are interrupting you, but you have to be like, if we're here to listen and have a conversation, turning off their voices doesn't make them go away. They're still going to be here. They're still going to be talking. It's just no one will be able to hear either of you. And so, again, I'm going to have to insist. You can block them on your own time, right? Like after you're done with the panel, but for the next 30 minutes, don't mute them, man. Okay, Ancom, go ahead.
All right. So I got a few points I want to go over. I'll try to be as quick as possible. First, I'm bringing it way back. I'm not meaning this to be any sort of discussion. I just want to point out, Paradigm Shift mentioned 1350. Perry asked what that was. It refers to an FBI study from I don't know when that essentially said 50% of all crime is committed by 13% of the population. Something to that effect. The reason he said it was a dog whistle is because it's often used as a counter argument to the idea that police have an inherent racial bias. Whether or not that's a good, bad, or otherwise counter argument, I'm not going to get into right now. Just informing. My main thing is it has been asked repeatedly, and some people have given good responses to this, but I just kind of want to get it as clear as possible. So there is a common like phrase you will hear in leftist organizing, which is educate, agitate, organize. Educate means what it says. Educate people about the ideas that we have. Agitate means you start to get people to understand that like these ideas aren't just theoretical, they are actually happening, and show people what the injustices that they are living under that they may not necessarily be aware of are. And organize is once you have that that group of people understanding and wanting to do something about, starting to organize communities and actually build up the sort of infrastructure, both social and physical, that is needed to start building a resistance against, i.e., capitalism, racism.
Thank you for the raid, Sansol. Appreciate you. Okay.
So the point of what Paradigm is saying, what Eli is saying, is that Paradigm gave policy proposals that it seemed at least Staxium and Erudite were on board with. Eli started talking about, like, these are the ways that we're going to start working to get those policy positions passed. It's not necessarily going through electoralism. I don't want to get into a big debate about electoralism. That's not what this is necessarily about. But the idea is we're trying to organize outside of the electoral sphere because, at least in my perspective, that sphere has been exhausted in terms of what it can actually do for people. We are not seeing the kinds of changes that we need to see at this stage in societal development, at least from our perspective, through an electoral process. And honestly, the history that we've seen about these sorts of movements trying to shift into an electoral sphere haven't really worked out. I actually watched hold on. Let me finish.
I just want to clarify.
I watched a debate between Zoe Baker, aka Anarcho-Pack, and Vosh earlier today, which was talking about this exact topic, and she gave some really good explanations as to why electoralism is not a useful tool in the toolbox of people who are trying to create this deep social change. Now, Perry, you keep saying violent revolution. I want to just point out that I don't think of the three of us here, any of us is necessarily looking for a violent revolution. Like Erudite, that may, we agree that may have to be the outcome if we've exhausted all other options. And actually, just because you wanted to say something, I will ask this question of you, Erudite. In your view, what does it look like to exhaust all other options? What is the criteria that you personally would consider to be the threshold before which violent revolution would be unacceptable and after which it would be acceptable? I understand it may not be a single line, it may be kind of a gray area, but just give us a general idea.
Before you answer that, let me read some super chats. $2 from the Trib to say most don't agree that all options are exhausted. Another $2 from the same person. Black people aren't a monolith, but we've been growing. And $20 from Lawson Harrison to say, I think you guys need to stop pinning good and perfect against each other. But yeah, answer the question.
Okay, can I actually ask you a couple of...
Can I answer the question after Kyla?
Sure. I'm actually going to ask you a couple of clarifying, just because you said a bunch of stuff in there, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding you first, if that's okay.
Fair enough.
So when you said we're trying to organize outside of the electoral sphere, when you say electoral sphere, what do you mean? Because I know the paradigm shift talked about using like government mobilization to some degree with like funding and stuff like that. So is that accounted? Are you talking about any form of fiat and like governmental interventionism, or what is electoral sphere to you?
So I believe with what Paradigm was talking about, yeah, that does require, government action, which does require, at least to some point, electoralism, or at least influencing those elected officials who, participate in the decision-making process. What I'm talking about is organizing communities to start trying to build these structures independent of the government. Right.
Okay, that's what I thought you were talking about. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
That's my personal view of it. I don't want to speak for any of the other panelists here, so I'm just kind of...
Sure. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know that you were steel manning the paradigm shift in Eli a little bit, but I believe that there is a bit of a schism between your perspective and theirs, because I wrote down the 3-step plan, and it seems like, at least I could be wrong, the paradigm shift could correct me, but there's a number of things like revitalizing government subsidy jobs that's necessarily governmental interventionism. You can't really do that as a community. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was separating your two positions. Okay, heard.
My position goes with him. I'm sorry.
So you don't want governmental jobs, because your second step was revitalizing government.
I have hope for plans, but his is actually the direction I'd like to go in. He was speaking.
Yeah, and I would like to clarify that,
by that.
my primary tactic is non-electoral, but if I see some pragmatism in electorally, achieving these goals,
you're like a reasonable
I will go for that. Yeah, I'm very much a diversity of tactics person. Yeah. I see certain tactics as being more likely to be effective, but I am a pragmatist in that I will go with what tactic gets me closer to, to my goals. You know,
I'm assuming
without-
there's a limit though, without like breaching ethics. And stuff
Yeah,
like that.
so
war crimes are off the list. You know,
someone earlier, I don't remember who, but they brought up something about means and ends, and another thing that discussion between Anarcho-Pac and Vosh talked about was the unity of means and ends, which is in a very short form the idea that you cannot use means that are antithetical to your ends and still achieve those ends, because by using those means you change yourself in the action of
immoral
doing that.
means getting to moral ends is a non-starter, as well as moral means to get to immoral ends is a non-starter. But yeah,
effectively yes. It's, you know, I think it's a little more detailed than that, but you know, as a short form, that's pretty acceptable. What we determine to be moral and immoral is up for debate, but again, too long to get into here.
I'll grant you all, just assume I'll grant you all the words. You did. Yeah, you did. I'll just assume I'll always grant you all the words and definitions. I just want to make sure we agree on them. Okay, right. You asked me, when have we hit the threshold of where we go? We've hit the end. There's no going back. We have to have a violent overtaking, right? I would basically say when it looks like there's no return of things getting better and the government positions itself to be unrestricted. That is when violent overtakes. So for example, in the January 6th insurrection, say we have a hypothetical world. Trump denounces the election, whatever, he keeps it. Okay, that would be the first thing of a government. And we also know that while Trump was in position, he rolled out a whole bunch of bills and policies and executive orders that gave him a lot more control and capacity than pretty much anyone ever did. What if he also began to do things like unrolling caps on like when elected officials can be in position, right? If he started doing all of these things that are inherently anti-democratic and necessarily pulling the power away from the people, that is where I think the people will be resorted to, unfortunately, violent means. However, I do not believe that we've hit that standard in our country right now. I do believe that there is still a lot of things like lobbying. There's a lot of things like getting political sophistication so that like people are getting inserted into governments, right? Getting, for example, like I think this is step 3 a little bit, where the paradigm shift talked about like good people who have like ground up experience. I want them in office, right? And figuring out ways. There's lots of ways through the electoral process that we can get these people funded, get them like out there. There's lots through volunteer services. I want to see these people's joining the Democratic Party, getting elected, getting their voice out there. That's what I want to see. And I don't believe all of these means have been exhausted.
So I got it.
Wait, I have a question. I have a question because I feel like I've been silent for a bit. My question is, okay, and this is not even my question. This is a question from a dear friend in my chat right now. Lobbying who and with what money? Right? So like, yeah, we could lobby.
Asian.
We could lobby. And not only could we could technically lobby. Like I was thinking, like, what if people pulled their money together and lobby? But then I realized that we will always be out lobbied by Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and basically every other billionaire.
Oh my God.
Right? We're always going to be out lobbied by those people.
Do you think Jeff Bezos is super... Wait. Do you think Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are super motivated being like, yeah, keep the police as they are. I fucking love it. Maybe Elon Musk. But do you think Jeff Bezos? Really?
Okay.
You think Jeff Bezos...
Hold on.
I would love to go.
I've driven an Amazon truck before. Hold on. Like, yes. Like, Jeff Bezos doesn't give two fucks about any of his employees, their safety, none of that shit.
I agree.
I agree. But that's
a far... Hold on. You have to establish a bridge where you believe that Jeff Bezos, if he saw a major black movement popping off that started lobbying and accruing funds organically through communities to lobby against the government, for example, to instantiate... What if we instantiated, for example, this is not like the policy necessarily I'm suggesting, a third party, hold on, I'm not done. I believe in capitalism. Based, yes, true. Based, yes, capitalism. Okay, hold on, I'm not done. What if, for example, we built this up?
You asked me if a billionaire is lobbying.
Okay, Eli Monty, you keep doing this. Stop. Eli Monty, you keep doing this. People are answering your questions, but you do not allow them to finish answering your questions. Let her answer. Let her talk. and then you can respond. I promise
Sorry,
you.
I feel like the answer's stupid, but continue.
Okay,
And I just don't
if
wanna
you
listen
think
to
my
it.
question is, are billionaires lobbying, and that I'm shocked that you would say yes, you're not understanding me at all. You're not actually listening in any way, because of course I think billionaires are lobbying. Are you kidding me? They're
Okay,
constantly
are
lobbying
billionaires
tech
lobbying
things.
to stop pro-black movements. Is that something you said, right?
Hold on. I said specifically, you said what lobbying? What funds? So you said a whole bunch of ways that a black community could begin to lobby. And I said, do you actually believe that if they started lobbying for like a third party community that had to look into police reform and had to sign off on police coming back into active duty, do you actually think that Jeff Bezos would be like, nah, fuck that shit? Really?
Yes.
Yes.
So
It is
Paradise,
within-
what
Paradise,
grounds?
hold on,
I
hold
would
on,
love
hold
to
on,
go.
hold on. Let me
I would love
He's
to go
just
on my
a
little thing.
billionaire.
let me just pop in
please.
real
No, it's not.
quick.
Community is the
So,
envy of
Erudite.
capitalism.
Erudite, I
no.
think you are taking Eli's point, the examples that he gave, and are being disingenuous with them. He gave the names of Musk and Bezos as just the, two billionaires off the top of his head. Because if you go to anyone in the U.S. and ask, name two billionaires, chances are Musk and Bezos are going to be very near the top of that list. If you anyway.
So I'm going to pause you for a
so the
second.
point
Eli,
is,
do you actually believe that specifically that Jeff Bezos would lobby against this? Is that what you're saying?
I think billionaires in general would lobby against these things because the
Jeff
point.
Bezos gave $10 million to Black Lives Matter, and they went and bought mansions with it.
So the thing about billionaires and about capitalism is that the forming of community is antithetical to capitalism as it stands. Because we need to keep the workers and we need to keep the cogs separate, because if they stand, because that literally this is the whole reason why racism.
Based on what? Source. Literally source, bro. I'm just going to ask you source.
History.
You are not allowing me to use history to establish that peaceful protests are effective, but now history is valid to establish. You guys have literally regularly stopped me.
They did.
Okay.
Not me.
So do you agree that my South Korean examples, my Armenian examples are valid examples of peaceful protesting, highly effective?
Sure.
Great.
You know what?
Okay.
You know what? To bite the bullet, I'll say that, okay?
Wait, does that mean you don't agree, or you do?
Erudite, I don't give a fuck, okay? I want
No,
to
it
answer
matters.
this question. I don't give a fuck, all right?
Well, it matters for consistency
I
here.
don't give a fuck, Erudite.
Okay.
I don't care.
Why?
I don't care,
Why don't you
right?
care if it matters though? Just
Because I'm trying to say something.
Eli.
I'm trying to say something. I
Why?
don't give a fuck about some shit she said way back when. I would have addressed it back then if I actually gave a fuck about it. I don't. Let me finish. Let me answer. There was a bunch of things that were said and things that were asked of me, and I did not get to answer any of them yet.
Okay.
What I do think, like I said, community and the establishment of community is antithetical to the capitalist hierarchy and how it stands right now in our current society, because if the people decide to band together and start forming communities, they might start all begin to realize that, oh wait, we're being fucked over by these rich billionaires. Maybe we should fuck them up. Maybe we should stop participating.
Some of the strongest communities.
Maybe we should stop participating in their game. Not only that, but the whole reason why the concept of whiteness in and of itself exists is because of the fact that rulers back, I don't remember the exact time period, but I'm pretty certain that Ancom and Paradigm probably know this off the top of their head, or they could find it very easily. But before America was founded, the European nobility realized that they were tired of getting beheaded, and they realized that they needed a way to subjugate and to divide the poor and working classes. So they said, all right, well, if you look like us, all of us are white. If you look like us, well, then you're just as good as us. And if you don't look like us, if you're not the same color as us, fuck you.
Okay.
So is this in your opinion, or do you have a source for these things? I'm just clear. I'm not even asking that in like a dig way. I'm just trying to ascertain, is this how you personally view history, or are you citing a source specifically for this? And I'm genuinely not doing a dig.
I don't remember the exact source, but if you would like me to find it, I'm pretty certain a 5-second Google search here will allow me to find it.
Right. I would
heard this
need-
back in I heard this back in high school.
So I would need
Um,
some form of source that says that the billionaire's best interest is to fuck us all, destroy community, and that is what they are doing, because that just doesn't seem to be the case. I don't see
Can I-
any
any
does that
proof of that.
not
Can I
seem to,
respond?
how does that
Because
not
Republicans
wanna-
have some of the strongest communities in the country, so that goes directly against what you're talking about.
where is your
Republicans
where
love
is your
capitalism.
where is your
The
what,
Bible
what, where's your where's your
Go to the
statistics
Bible
for that?
Belt.
Go to the Bible Belt. Some of the poorest some of the poorest states in
Yes,
this
and
nation
they're
with
so
abysmal.
unified. They are so unified and have community. Community
Are they?
does not have it. Clearly,
By what metric?
you said earlier today that they are connected socially.
I don't care.
I know you don't care because all you care is crying about
Because
black
it's a
even.
stupid talking point. It's just a stupid.
Yeah.
It's a stupid, unsubstantiated talking
It's
point
like,
that I know
just
you
like
can't substantiate.
if you worked at an Amazon warehouse,
Did you ever find like a source to back up the shit that you were saying earlier? I don't
About black crime statistics?
I don't see one in chat.
Well, he said that you said that you would bite the bullet.
To be the most fair, Kyla also
So-
asked you
I
for
didn't
a
say don't
source,
find
and
it.
you haven't provided
yeah,
that one.
where
That's
is
fair.
you still haven't provided your source either. But I mean, if you really
Sure.
want me
You
to
know what?
show,
You know
if
what?
you really want me to show you
Okay.
that black men commit violent crimes at a higher rate, I didn't say 50%. I never said 13% of the population commits 50% of the crimes, but when you look at it per capita, when you look at cities like Chicago, when you look at cities like New York, when you go 30 minutes down the road to Philadelphia, from where I'm from, you know that majority of those crimes are committed by black and Hispanic men. I'm sorry.
Wait,
Okay.
can I
Can I try to
sorry.
reroute the
I
conversation
have,
a little bit?
I have, I'm gonna bring it back.
said
That's
why it is.
exactly
We
what
know
I would
why
like to
it
bring
is.
it back.
The reason why,
Can we-
I just
can we
want
do
to
that?
say,
Let him finish. Let him finish,
feel like
and
I
then
could,
you
but
can.
the
The reason
Yeah.
why,
If you wanna-
why is so fucking stupid and non-consequential because we can start the change today through our actions. So why are we worried about the?
Can I
I
can
try
I
to
just
derail.
can I just I'm gonna rerail and give us a source,
Well-
okay? I'm gonna give us a source. It's an empirical study. It's a good study. It's got a really big sample size, and it talks about how violence decreases public support for groups, right? So it looks at a case study of the Charlottesville riot, and it talks about basically anti-racist versus white nationalists, who most of us fucking hate in this planet. And when there was case studies when they gave like a hypothetical of anti-racists being highly violent towards the white nationalists, people were significantly less empathetic towards the anti-racists, despite mostly agreeing with what they're arguing for. And there was some small increase in empathy for white nationalists, and they thought that they had more of a valuable like argument, which is awful. That's the worst possible outcome. And we saw when we reversed these things, when it was white nationalists being super violent towards anti-racists and anti-racists were not violent back, the empathy and like siding for anti-racist positions skyrocketed. I will link the study. I will include it, and it will rerail us into talking about violence.
I want to give space.
Did
I want to give
I wanna
space.
ask-
I want to
I
give
wanna
space.
ask-
No, stop, Eli. You have dominated this conversation. We gotta give Paradigm, your partner.
Harry can't just sit here and,
Here.
and preach
No, I got you.
anti-black
I got you. I got
racist
you. I got
talking
you.
point. Okay.
You know I got you. You know I got
Paradigm.
you.
Yeah.
So look,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm
Paradigm.
I'm sorry.
Hey, so I hate the FBI as much as anybody because when we really get down to it, really looking at statistics of things requires a skew of like not understanding anything in the event in question. But I just wanted to let y'all know that as of 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022, table 43B, table 43C, 44B, 44C, and so on, the total amount of crime committed in all regards across the entire United States is majority 69% white people.
That's because white people are the majority of the
Obviously, you're gonna- you have
population.
to do a per
This is why we do the
capita.
per
Come on.
capita.
Okay, so
He's
So-
responding. He's responding.
Continues.
He's responding to Perry's disingenuous question. And you people fucking know it.
No, I
okay,
don't.
You
Wait,
guys
hold on.
asked for.
I
Okay,
wanna-
I didn't.
you know how I
neither
feel about
me
the
nor
situation.
Staxiums necessarily agreed with everything. Like, I don't think either of us spoke up when you guys were having the argument about crime
Correct.
debates.
I'm-
And when
Eli,
you
I'm on your
outlined a
side.
need for per capita, I just
wait,
agree
we
with
got
that.
10 minutes left. You do what you got to do. I'm
Okay,
done
can I?
talking.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go on a
no,
quick.
hold on,
Paradigm.
please.
Oh, sorry,
I need
man.
y'all to hear me. Like Wick, you know I do this generally at the end of this shit, but we just gonna do it now. I feel like me and Wick will have many disagreements on things, but the one thing he won't do is play me like a fucking sucker. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate him giving me the shot, and like putting me on these things because he knows what I do and he knows how I come. I feel like I am legitimately, and now you can sit there and say how you want to respond to it, whatever. But like as people, I feel like a few people in here are playing me for a sucker. I'm following this with a transcript, and I'm literally watching words that were never used be brought up as responses to things that I've said. So responses to things that Erudite has said. Responses to things that Eli has said. This, I don't know if y'all don't get out often, but like I talk to people daily. Like on some G shit. We not Paradigm no more. This is Marquise right now. Like on some G shit, I talk to people daily. And the way this conversation went down is really showing me that y'all really need y'all clips. Y'all really need y'all points to be excised. The original question, my last statement in this panel, the original question was, is violence necessary to achieve a political goal? That wasn't the exact question, but that's where it was headed. The answer to that question is just yes, because nothing else seems to work for certain people. We applaud the American Revolution. We applaud the Dominican Revolution. We applaud Haiti's Revolution. We celebrate these things. We already have examples where nonviolence
Wasn't the Haiti Revolution violent?
It was also a tyrannical government. It was also a violent revolution.
Let me cook.
Paradigm, it's really your own people who do it to you. Okay, finish.
Right? Yeah. Let me cook.
No, I was just saying I wasn't going against Paradigm.
Right. We've seen these things before, and then we see people like Nat Turner, when a man had us on a back burner, led one of the greatest freedom revolutions the slaves ever heard of. Then he got murdered. They'll kill black leaders. You got to talk about power scales here. You're asking me to be nonviolent. I'm asking the state to leave me alone.
Yeah.
Whether it be cutting my food stamps, whether it be making the HRA office appointments long enough that I can't keep a job because I gotta be there from 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. If you don't stand on that line first, these experiences that poor people have to go through, who generally are black, all lead to different conclusions and outcomes. Your request of us today, your side of the panel has asked me, can nonviolence win out? I'm here to tell you, I've been in the protests. I've been on the front lines. My dad's been on the front lines. I've ran for office. I've heard the stories. I've traveled the United States. I've done that legwork, and I'm only 29. The answer to that question is we are running out of options. Whether you want us to sit there and take it again like we did in 1964, sure, we could try that. But I'm telling you right now, DeSantis is a threat. Trump is a threat. And Joe Biden's too old to handle this. Kamala's a cop. Like, you're not going to assign any position to me that is not just, I've answered all your questions. The answer is still yes, because these people are hurting. And you can't erase that through a debate, through a panel, through a reason, through a metric, through nothing. Because the first episode I ever did of this show, sweetheart, was telling people how a cop pulled a gun on me and wanted to shoot me for looking at a film location. Let's really talk about something that matters beyond this silly fallacy that is being brought up, that violence somehow makes it negative. I don't want to be associated with that. Of course they don't. Nobody likes violent things. But I get to watch violence happen to my people every day. And then I get to watch people like Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens. They deserved it. Let's talk about it. You want us to be nonviolent? Stop being violent to me first, and I yield the rest of my.
I want to say one thing, and that
Staxiums, is that poor Staxiums.
Thank you.
Staxiums.
Sorry, I just want to say a few things, which is, we need to be able to see the bad and the good at the same time. There is such a need when we look historically and when we look to the future to recognize that we have so much more to do and so much far to go, and that there is still knives and errors that need to be corrected and patched and healed in this country. And we also need to recognize that we have come so fucking far. We have come so far in the last 300 years. You look back 300 years ago and you bring back Frederick Douglass. I don't want to speak for him, but I would be surprised if he wouldn't say this is a fundamentally different country than where I came from. We have come so far and we have so much more to go. I am not asking you to be complacent. I am not trying to erase your pain. I am not trying to say, hey, we have so much more to do, and I want us to be furious every moment, and I want us to be grateful every moment. I protested for Philando Castile, and I protested for George Floyd, and I protested for 8 Can't Wait. And I want to say we have so much more to do, but I also want to say that my city enacted 4 of the policies of 8 Can't Wait, and that saved lives. And that matters. And I want to be able to be grateful for that without you guys saying that I'm not frustrated enough. I am frustrated, and I want us all to be frustrated. And I don't know. I guess what
grateful.
To be
you
clear,
be
this counts
grateful,
as your closing statement because we got to wrap it up. So.
Sure.
You can be
Eli,
you can be
ahead.
grateful, but I'm just gonna say this, and that is I'm gonna say a few things. First thing is, going back to like Dr. Martin Luther King, I've been wanting to say this for a while now.
Your closing, but go ahead.
That's fine. That's fine. And that is that again. He was the nonviolent one, and y'all killed him. Like he was shot in the head in his sleep. Well, not him. He wasn't shot in the head. Fred Hampton was the one shot in his head. What did he do? Fred Hampton, the one that actually tried to do, the whole unity thing, no violence and all that shit, who formed movements and what have you.
Yeah.
He was shot in the head. How many more of our people have to die before things actually change in this country? Because I do not buy the idea that we have come so far. I think that maybe if you're a white person and if you view this through the lens of whiteness, yeah, it might look like we came really far. But to the rest of us down here, aside from Perry, because I guess he's just a different animal, but to the rest of us down here, there really has not been that much change. And all that happens is that it seems as though there's people that keep gaining power, that want to keep pulling us back and bringing us back to the way shit was. What the fuck do you people think was meant when Trump and all these other idiots were saying, make America great again? Like, first off, through the eyes of a minority, when the fuck was this bitch ever great? I'll just answer the question for you. It never was, and it isn't. So, aside from all of, like, getting rid of all of the tone policing, all of that shit, I'm going to reiterate something I already said, and that is that because I think too many people heard it, but didn't actually internalize it. And that is that how many more of us have to die before y'all get it? And then, A, and then B, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
I lost my train of thought.
Can I say something real quick about how many more people have to die?
Not only how many more people have to die, but also stop judging progress and viewing progress in this country or in any country for that matter through the lens of whiteness. I am fucking begging you, because then maybe we might actually fucking get somewhere.
Okay.
Do you think
I want to ask one question because this is all right.
But we are wrapping up. We're
Okay.
to be clear, just real quick, we're staying for an open. I'm going to open this bitch up. If you want to stay, that's cool. If you don't, I get that too. But these are kind of closing statements. We are wrapping up. I would ask Perry. I would love you and Monty especially to stay because of questions for both of you. But everyone's here is invited to stay. But finish your statement, please.
I just wanted to ask Eli, how many black men do you think will die in the course of fighting this oppression with violence?
I don't know. Well, I want to pull up a page out of your book. How many white people are going to die? How many Asian people are going to die? How many people in general are going to die?
A bunch of them. A bunch of people will die in the course of violent revolution. So when you're sitting here asking how many more black people need to die before things start to change, you're just advocating for more black men to die.
I would say that within your position of, you can go in a second, Ancom, but I just want to give this one thing. I would say your position of neutrality when violence is going on is what's going to lead to more black people dying. At least this way we can die on our feet and die with fucking dignity.
Yeah, so the question isn't how many people are going to die in a revolution. It's how many people, how many black men are going to die if we do nothing?
Exactly.
Right?
No one's saying that.
It is not a question of in or one way
I'm
no
saying
one
it,
dies,
Paradigm.
another way people or some people die. It is a question of how many, right? If nothing changes, if the status quo continues, then black men keep dying every fucking day. If we do go the violent revolution route, which again, I like Erudite, don't necessarily want to see that happen. I'm a little bit more willing to, to work toward it than she is, I think. But anyways, the point is that fewer people will die in the long run when we fight for liberation than if we simply stay under the existing oppression.
Okay, thank you. Perry, did you have a closing statement, or was that your closing statement?
I mean, my closing statement is I wish that we stayed a little bit more on the topic of nonviolence versus violence, but I want to reiterate the six key principles of Dr. Martin Luther King. Once again, number one, nonviolence resists evil without resorting to violence. Number two, nonviolence seeks understanding and friendship, not humiliation. Number three, nonviolence opposes evil itself, not individuals committing acts of evil. That's an important one. Number four, nonviolent resistors endure suffering without retaliation, recognizing its redemptive power. Number five, nonviolent resistance avoids physical and internal violence, refusing to hate opponents. And number six, nonviolent resistors maintain a deep faith in a just future. I think that if you want to work towards the best possible future, that nonviolence will always be the correct way to go, unless you're dealing with a tyrannical regime like Erudite specified earlier with like her alternate January 6th situation.
And where is MLK now?
He's dead, dude.
What
I'm sorry.
You guys killed Malcolm X.
People die sometimes.
Malcolm X got killed for not being violent.
The poster boy
That
that
is
has
true,
been
though.
jerking off this entire time for why I think peaceful protest is like the end all
Okay,
be all.
let me ask you, Eli.
Wait,
Eli.
None of us think it's good.
No,
Everyone agrees with you that MLK dying is bad. Everyone agrees.
Let me do this real quick. Because it's so fucking, this is so stupid. Oh my god, dude, I'm so sorry that I have a different opinion than you, and it makes you think that I'm sucking white people's dicks. Here's the thing. Oh my god, Eli. Dude, first off, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to go there.
Okay, well, I want Erudite to have her closing statement. I'll close this out, and then we'll get to open, and we'll address all this, because there's a reason MLK got shot, and you know why he got shot? Because he was fucking effective. Because what he was doing was working, and they could not have that. And so they stopped him, right? His non-violent method was more powerful than the other methods, so they killed him because there was only one way to stop it. But it didn't stop it because him being a martyr, the concept of martyrdom, has elevated him to a status that they can never take away. Anyway, Erudite, go ahead.
So what you're saying is we need another martyr to die for this.
No, nobody's
that's
saying
not
that
what he's
fucking
saying.
obviously. What he's saying is that the assassination of MLK was awful. It was bad and it was evil. However, don't let evil people rob you of your own sense of ethics. That's what we're saying.
If you put fists up, fists are coming up back. That's just where it's
because it's like it's I'm not even trying to be funny, but I've heard and it's not like it matters, but like I've spoken to Jordan Peterson, asked him a question, he gave me that question. The crazy part, because we got on the MLK thing. I don't know why he decided to talk to me about that, but I think it's kind of obvious now. And he said that same thing, but it's like it's giving Jews for Hitler type like beat. Like, you see what I mean? Like I'm still trying to make people recognize we are not in the talking stage of like the rights movement now. Can we agree on that?
I agree with you. We're not about.
Nobody's agreeing with that. That's the whole point. You keep saying violence is necessary.
I didn't say that. I said that the right is gaining power. Are we aware of that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So
yes.
And the Democrats in this country don't have really the will of coalition to kind of stop that come 2028, you know?
Yeah, because we have a whole bunch
Not
of
only
religious
that, but they
zealots in our
also-
group.
but-
We have a whole
but they
bunch of
also-
resi-
they also
Can I
actively
try
stop
at all
Yeah,
or no?
erudite.
They stop more
Erudite.
radical
Because
people.
we
They
have
actively
a
need
bunch
that
of
us.
religious zealots on the left in large part. There's a whole bunch
No,
of
we
really
do not have
untenable
religious zealots.
positions.
We have
Yes,
people
we
who are
do.
desperate, who
Okay,
are
I
down
guess
on
I
their
just-
luck, who are
Erudite.
poor, who are
You had your
alienated.
closing statement. Erudite, go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'll go to my closing statement instead.
Yes, please. We're on closing statements. To be clear, no one should be interrupting anyone right now. Just FYI. Erudite, go ahead.
A faulty assumption people have is that the government is built to suppress the public, that liberal democracies are built to suppress the public. Here in North America, where we have a liberal democracy, while there are major flaws and there are some corruptions going on that need to get purged out, this government is designed to restrict politicians, which is why it is so hard to implement massive change and governments follow the people. In the case of AOC, she was an idealist. She got elected. She hasn't been able to deliver on a bunch of stuff because once you get behind the scenes, you realize that there's a whole bunch of shit that slows progress down. However, what we do see is that gradual incremental improvement tends to be better for societies overall. This is the basis of what liberal democracies are built upon. And so, yes, I agree that there is much work to be done, a lot. I am not sold out that the only answer now is violence. I think if that is the approach that you have, it's super dangerous.
Okay. With that, gang.
Wait, hold on.
Zach's team didn't get to.
Can I have a little?
Yeah, I thought you
didn't have a
did. I
conclusion.
said I
No, I
made it
didn't.
clear was your. Go ahead, fair enough.
Oh, I don't think that was okay. Sorry. I just want to say. Oh, Eli left. Damn.
Yeah.
Well, this was I was mostly gonna reach out to him mostly because I wanted to say that I acknowledge the privilege that I have in this country. Like I used to be that motherfucker who would say like, hey, look, racism's not that bad. It's just a bad apple. Like they just have to keep their hands down and run away. And I mention that because I'm ashamed that I used to say that. And then I watched a video of 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 and he did everything that I said he should, and he got shot. And I only knew that happened because the camera was on and I wasn't listening. And I am sympathetic to Eli's frustration. And I want to acknowledge that at a fundamental level, I will never truly understand it. But Kyla brings up a good point that I think we just kind of overrun, that we want to mention, hey, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated because he was trying to be peaceful. But Malcolm X essentially did the same thing, that he left the Nation of Islam and he left Elijah Muhammad and he took a Hajj and he realized that maybe integration wasn't that bad actually. And Farrakhan killed him. And like that is something to grapple with, where sometimes we need to be a little bit more strategic with our methods. And that's really all I'm advocating for today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Post your links in my chat. Tell people where they can find you if they want to find you. But gang, we got some shows coming up for you this week that you might find interesting. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're doing open call-in, so if you have a problem with anything I've said or anything I've tweeted out, you can call in. And Rora Pickles will be our co-host for the day, and she's a lovely lady. It should be fun. Check us out. On Wednesday at 6 p.m., I'll be talking to Origin of Language. On Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll be going on to the Crucible to debate Big Papa Fascist, who agrees that violence is the only way forward. He's coming at it from a little bit of a different angle. But that will be a fun debate that I will be participating in rather than moderating. Friday, we will be having a panel on birth control and contraception, and that should be interesting. It's the second sponsored panel of the two-part series. The one we did last Friday, sponsored by Rebellion Pack. Get out the youth vote, right? And then on Saturday, you guys get a Saturday stream today. There's a lot of streams today. Saturday at 6, a time to be determined. Me, Professor Meat, and Sulfur will be going against President Sunday and two people of his choice, a moderator to be determined, debating this subject again rather than me moderating. But gang, it's been fun.
Yo, Wick,
what's up?
Talk to me about that in
Okay, I'll talk to you about that after. I'll reach out. But anyway, regardless, thank you for being here. I will say my piece on this. I take a stronger stance than Erudite and Staxium's. I think that, yes, sometimes violence is necessary. But even when it is necessary, it leaves a stain on you. It is always, right, always going to be a problem. Violent means lead to violent ends. And much like Martin Luther King said in the letter from a Birmingham jail, right, we must, he continues, right, to condemn immoral means to moral ends, but we almost also must condemn moral ends to immoral means. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing nothing, and I want to reiterate that, doing nothing is not an option. But what we do matters, and if we throw fists, the only way that ends is blood, whether victory or loss. And you only start a fight. Starting a fight is like lighting a fire. You can't control where the wind may blow, and you can't control who gets burned. Okay, thank you. We will be opening this up after if you want to stay, but for now, I'll let my panelists go if they need to go. So yeah. Okay, Paradigm, we'll see you later. I hope the rest of you can stay. Let's see what people we can bring on. Hello.
Hi, I'm Dave.
Hi, Dave. What do you got for us today, Dave? Any thoughts or questions for the panel?
Sure, give me 1 sec. I'm just setting up.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, but you're super echoey.
That is so strange. For some reason, it's connected to my computer and not my actual mic system, which is giga-funny.
Okay, well, either way, do you have a question for the panel or anything to say? Or...
Oh, well, the first question obviously is like, so the first one's a meme one. I just think that like 𝕬𝖎𝖙 as a white woman. I'm sorry.
Okay, if you're not going to be serious.
Wait, just me? So me as a white woman, but this white man can be here and this white man can be here.
That's what I'm saying, man. As a white woman, you shouldn't be talking.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
Dave, what
It's
you
weird
got
they don't
for
mention
us?
ANCAP's race. It's almost like they agree with him, so they're chill with it.
Yeah.
It's because
we're
he's
mad
on
at
the
you.
side of violent revolution.
Yeah.
No offense,
And
Hank.
like,
I mean, he's not totally on the
Tom
side of.
ANCAP is a different.
Yeah, he's an ANCOM.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was like
Oh, did I say
super.
ANCAP? I'm so
I
sorry.
realized that.
I'm so sorry.
I
He wasn't
realized
super
that may
pro-violent
seem like
revolution.
a trivial difference, and like from
No,
a
it's
silly
not a
way,
trivial
sure,
difference.
but,
No,
like,
I know the difference between ANCAP and ANCOM.
Okay,
I just
all
had
right,
it in my.
cool.
No. My bad.
Okay.
You know, I
Missed
actually
that.
love the misogyny. It actually like drives home a bit like more of my concerns about the religious left. I think that's pretty fucking gross. That
So I'm not
specifically
sure-
only white women don't get to talk about these.
He
types
might
of
have been more
things.
angry that you were a woman than that you were white. To be
Uh,
honest, is my guess.
I'm gonna
For this
guess it's
call,
the
at
least.
intersection. I'm gonna guess it's the
Yeah.
intersection.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Also, I don't
my-
think ANCOM is super pro like violent revolution. He's very tactical of like whatever means necessary to bring about like anarcho-communism. I believe. I could be wrong, but that was my understanding of him.
I mean, no, I'd say that's a decent summation.
Okay, Dave, what you got for us?
You're good. My question's more for the pro-violence, which there's less of now. But oh, sorry.
I think I'm the only one
apparently
left.
I still have it going in the background. Do you think that you're likely to just have more deaths by engaging in violent revolution than non-violent protests?
So, to be clear, like my goal in all of this, and all of the stuff that I personally advocate for, is trying to save lives, right? So I am trying to avoid death. I do think that if we do, like, based on kind of projections, based on current patterns, I see the likelihood of increasing death as very high. And if I see that in the long term, a violent revolution will have the effect of saving lives going forward, then that may be an acceptable solution. In the short term, what I'm looking at is not so much violent revolution as just the use of some form of violence in the process of trying to gain some amount of liberation for oppressed people.
Like you'd probably call
whether
it
they
instigation, right?
Was that?
You'd probably call it instigation, right? Like that's kind of, is that fair?
I think so. Sorry, I'm not quite.
I think what he's asking,
Sometimes I
maybe if I steel man
Go
what
ahead.
I think he's saying, I think what he's
Okay.
asking is, because this is a common position, I think specifically in anarcho-communism, because I've been doing a lot of read on like 𝕾𝖎𝖙 and stuff, and I'm not sure where in the all, because I know it's a very diverse world as well. Are you
Fucking
basically
love
saying...
Emma Goldman. Just need to point that out.
Okay, so we have some level of common language at least,
Oh,
of
yes.
understanding each other.
Yeah.
So I think what he's asking is, are you saying that essentially violence might sometimes be necessary as like a backdrop for the non-violent protest to exist within, and that the non-violent is actually in large part successful because of the violent? Like they're like kind of like the villains that nobody deserves, right? They're kind of like the Batman characters.
That was the original point I made in my opening statement here, is that yes, I think for a non-violent a non-violent movement to succeed, it will often need a violent boogeyman, if you will. It's kind of, I think the way I phrased it was along the lines of, work with us, the peaceful protesters, or you get them, the violent protesters.
Malcolm
right?
X put it, the bullet or the ballot, is what he described.
Something
Well, that was
Yeah.
after
Yeah,
he
well, that was-
transitioned to a peaceful. That was after his conversation
After his
with
conversation.
with MLK and Mecca. So
Yeah. Now, I'm also very much of the self-defense stance, and I have a wider view of violence than I think most people would. Obviously, I think of it as the, bodily and physical harm standpoint, but I have something a little bit wider where I think that there are actions which are in the immediate time frame are, do not cause harm, but will inevitably cause harm within a short span. An example I give is evicting someone from housing because they can't, they're unable to pay rent and they have no other housing prospects that they can go to. That is a violent act. A lot of people will disagree with that. Not really going into the disagreement, but that's kind of where my standpoint is. So
thank you for
so when people are taking, when people are taking actions that they see as defending against that sort of violence, I consider that, while violent, it is justified. And that is, to me, the core thing is the idea of justified violence.
I got some super chats to read, and every moment you delay is violence against me because it makes it less likely that other people will
Bro,
do
you're stealing his.
violence, right?
It'll make it less likely that he can afford his
Okay,
rent and he might get kicked
indeed. So the Trib won $2. Civil rights movement was a revolution. It was peaceful. Also the Trib for $5. We would lose, Marquis. We are the minority. We lose if this gets violent. Maybe we should leave? I say no, though. I think we can keep pushing forward. And yeah, okay, that was it.
Since that was to, that was to Marquis, aka
Marquis,
the paradigm
but he's not
shift.
here
So,
anymore,
yeah.
But I will say this, right? That loose definition of violence, as I kind of mockingly made fun of a little bit, is so broad that anything could be considered violent. Me cutting you off, right, in traffic and making you late to work could be considered violence. And the reason I push back against that so much is because we understand in a societal level, most people understand that if someone's doing violence to you, it's justified to do violence back. But that's the problem, right? If we justify any slight against us that might result in material harm, that we can do violence against a person doing that, it opens up a Pandora's box that we do not want to do. Because I promise you, Ancom, your side will lose. The state will push down on your neck until you are dead.
Wait. I have a question.
Hold on, Staxium. Let me just
respond
real quick.
Respond. Sorry,
so I see what you're saying, and I want to clarify that when I talk about violence in response to violence, I'm specifically talking about forms of defense, things that will protect from violence.
The state is saying that they are protecting and defending itself against your revolution.
Yes, they think that.
Yes,
true.
that's the thing, though, right? Like when we use words like, well, we're doing it in self-defense, right? And they're the aggressors. The other side also thinks this. They think you are aggressing upon them, that they have these things, they have them in place, and you are coming in and saying, hey, give us that. They're refusing to. Marquise made the paradigm shift made an interesting point, like that he mentioned that the government taking him away from his food stamps, right? And I'm not sure if he's on food stamps or not. Either way, it's fine. Is kind of a form of aggression against him and violence against him. But they would argue, right, that the government's the one giving you the food stamps in the first place, right? This isn't like yours by right. They are giving you welfare. And while I agree with the welfare, again, is it aggression for someone who has been giving you a thing who stopped giving it to you? I don't know. I don't know if that's
Well,
true.
the complexity is that like somebody, like this is like the abuser argument, right? Like somebody can be like nice in some areas and actually like gaslighty, manipulative, and awful. I actually think the bigger issue, because I think Emma Goldman's arguments are actually decently compelling. The area where it falls apart for me is I don't know how to tell like I shouldn't say January 6th, but like Charlottesville, or people who, even if I say I disagree with them and I disagree with their worldview about the conspiracies that they're peddling, they legitimately believe that they're oppressed. They legitimately believe that like governments and agencies are against them, mostly because they get canceled off of like a bunch of platforms because they say fucking horrible shit that nobody wants to hear. And mostly businesses don't want on their platform for advertisers, let's be honest. And so I have a hard time drawing the line of like, okay, well, if the side that I like is allowed to do basically self-defensive violence in response to like what you're describing, which is like systemic oppressions. How do I make the same argument that the side that I morally disagree with and politically disagree with doesn't get the same stance? And I don't really want a world where I look at Charlottesville and I go, I don't know how to tell you that like, you know, these like white nationalists aren't are kind of okay, maybe okay-ish by my own logic to be doing violence against like anti-racists. I don't want that world, which is why I have a hesitation with Emma Goldman, for example, and what kind of you're saying.
I want to get some
a
other
good point.
people in here that have joined, and I want to give them some space. I want to give Temperate Takes, first of all, a chance to ask a question of the panel if she has one.
Do you mind if I do one quick follow-up question to his answer?
Yes, but if I after I say the super chat from Lawson Harrison for $5 to ask what percentage of Black Americans do we think are going to be fighting with the revolutionaries. But ask your follow-up, and then I want to get to Temperate.
With your definition of what violence is, wouldn't that then consider blocking traffic to also be a form of violence because you're keeping people from getting to their jobs that they're going to need to provide for their families?
I mean, yes, I would consider that a form of violence. Now, I want to clarify that there is a difference to me between violence and justified violence. Not all violence is justified. How that justification takes place, I can get into if you want, but that I just want to make sure there is a distinction there, and that, you know, I think there are forms of justified violence. But yes, you're absolutely right. Like, I do agree that blocking traffic is a form of violence.
Okay,
Temperate, go ahead, take it away.
good answer.
So something I noticed is that most of the panels seem to assume that a social movement are the ones who get to decide how much violence is employed. They're the ones that are bringing an issue to those in power. Isn't it more that is those in power who get to decide how much violence is employed? Because they're the ones who are going to make the decision how badly they want to fight back against any particular social movement.
So I'll try to field this from my perspective, at least, right? So one of the reasons that MLK, like the Montgomery bus boycott, was so effective, even though it was entirely nonviolent, right? But it won. Let's be clear, the Montgomery bus boycott was a total victory for Team Civil Rights Movement, right? Because it hurt their pocketbook. We need to put, and MLK understood this, right? That you put pressure points on the things that the people in power care about. And you can do so entirely non-violently. That doesn't mean it's peaceful, so to speak, right? You are agitating, you are disruptive. Blocking traffic, sit-ins, all these things are disruptive. It hurts their pocketbook. But when you add violence to the mix, then the state starts not only to fear for their power, but they begin to fear for their lives. And when people fear for their lives, they act much differently than when they just fear for their power. Like the justifications of what they are willing to do to stop you if they think they're coming, if I think that you're coming to steal something from me, there are things I'll do to try to stop you, but they won't be entirely like the same. They won't be to the extreme as if I think you're coming to kill me, then all bets are off. If I believe that you are coming to kill me, then I am willing to do much, much more to stop you, right? And so that's the reason I think that violence particularly is very, it's not entirely ineffective, but it's less effective because it makes the people in power fear for their lives. And in that case, they are much more willing to respond mega violently. To be clear, they do respond violently even when you threaten their power, but the levels of violence escalate very quickly. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Can I?
Oh,
So-
Saxium, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Kyla, if I spoke over you.
No, I think it
so-
was the Tempest that was about to speak.
Oh,
so.
Sorry, I didn't.
No,
Tempest,
it's
do you
okay.
want to go?
Women are all the same. It's okay.
Camera
I
with no
understand.
camera. It's hard.
We're a monolith. I know.
Shut up, white woman.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna kind of elaborate on the point Wick was making a little bit. So I honestly don't know a whole lot about the bus boycotts. I know more about the diner sit-ins. But using the sit-ins as an example, okay, is if instead of, well, I mean, they kind of did. They sent cops in there and pulled people out and arrested a bunch of people. But okay, say when they did the boycotts, if instead of sending the cops in and arresting people and hurting people, if the state just said, okay, all these people are keeping businesses from running, we'll just give them what they want so business can resume. Instead, they sent a bunch of, so it was the state that chose violence in that situation, not the protesters.
Yeah, and when the state chooses violence, right, as 𝕶𝖓 mentioned, there is data to suggest, and I have a source that can back this up for the civil rights movement particularly, that the data when the state instigated and perpetrated violence against the protesters, and the protesters did not fight back, that's clear, right? When they did not resist, institutional support for their cause rose, right? And when they did resist, it was neutral. It didn't really make a thing. And when the protesters instigated the violence, support for social control of them rose, which means for support for the police to restore law and order. In fact, the 1968 riots, right, that occurred after Martin Luther King's death, rather than usher in, as many would falsely claim, the signing of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, what it actually did, and again, there's data to show this, is it led to the election of Richard Nixon, who famously was very, very great for civil rights at the time. He was elected with a 0.7% majority in his first election, right? Only a 0.7% population difference, right? The Electoral College was different, but we all recognize, right, that the margins in some states can be very, very small. So yeah, it's I think very clear from me to the data at least that in the civil rights movement especially, it was the nonviolence that won the day. And when the state,
And I want to
but go on, please, yeah, go.
Oh, okay.
I know your
I
point,
want to
too.
just say that on like a macro scale. When you're watching two people fight, you know, you don't really have an instinct to jump in and help one person or the other, right? You're looking at them, they're on equal footing, they're fighting, they're going to handle it, whatever. Now, you watch two guys start jumping a guy, your instinctive desire is to go help the guy that's getting jumped. Right? You never want to see somebody being bullied, being beaten on, someone in unfair odds, right? When you blow that out into the civil rights protests, if it was just gangs of MLK supporters versus the government or the police or the fire department, whoever they sent out there, you're just going to watch that on the news and you're going to say, wow, these people are violent. Why are they always fighting out in the streets? In the inverse, when you see children getting sprayed with fire hoses and attacked by dogs, your innate empathy is already kicking in. You're already seeing these people as equals. You're seeing those children out in the streets as if it was your children out in the streets being attacked by fire hoses and dogs. And that's one of the most powerful things that nonviolent protests that a lot of people just don't talk about. But yeah, you guys can go ahead.
Wick,
Could I?
Okay, sorry,
Sorry,
next.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna just gonna jump in real quick. So Wick mentioned something that I 100% agree with, which he mentioned Nixon, and this was kind of mentioned in the larger debate that kind of I wasn't really able to respond to, but someone mentioned like, hey, voting doesn't matter. I mean, look at Nixon and like that. Obviously the very cruel tendencies towards incredibly racist policies that were enacted, and I was like, that is such a good example of why voting does matter, because we have to compare the policies of Johnson versus Nixon and see how fundamentally different they were. To Ancom's point, I think that it's a fair critique that for some reason human beings see violence where you punch someone and do physical harm to one another as like fundamentally different than depriving them of food or a place to live, and that is a valid critique. And I totally understand that distinction shouldn't really be there, because depriving someone of housing is basically inflicting harm onto them. But kind of the crux of my argument is like, unfortunately we live in a democracy, and unfortunately that is how people perceive violence, where it is acts done upon each other, and they don't see a deprivation of housing as violence enacted from the state, even though that's kind of what it is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that like we live in a democracy.
I don't like that phrasing of this is like calling it violence has ramifications. Do you think because someone hasn't made enough housing available to you that it's okay to go in, tie them up, and beat the shit out of them until they give you what you want?
Could I respond with a question? What was worse, Wick, the Holocaust or the Holodomor?
Both were
That's a
pretty
great
fucking
question.
bad, right? Both were pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
Bad.
But one was a deprivation.
I know.
Of, yeah.
But one was a deprivation of food and rights and housing.
And the other one was an extermination.
And the other was an extermination, right? And so like this is a really tough one, right? I lean towards the Holocaust because there's something really like yucky feeling, but I don't know if my leaning is just based in like basically my feelings. I've been like, oh, this like looks worse, right? And there's other comparisons that I hope Amcom will probably make to draw between these, but yeah.
I think, and I hate to go the meme route, but it's the only one I can think of to kind of demonstrate this. It is the trolley problem, right? It is the question of explicit action versus harm that comes due to inaction, right? And most people, I hope, will know that the trolley problem isn't meant to have an answer. It's really just meant to reveal something about the person who's thinking about the question. Like, what things do you value?
So
what kinds of
I do want to respond though, right? And I'll tackle the trolley problem as well, but I want to respond to Erudite's question as well, right? So if, right, in the course of events, simply through passiveness, a harm comes to someone because you refuse to give them something because passively you aren't doing it, then I think that is less bad than someone
so
who
this is where I caveat
actively...
this. I disagree with this idea of explicit harm, like actionable harm. In the case of the Holodomor, right? If you have a child that you're neglecting, say you're like a mom and you choose not to breastfeed or give it formula, right? The idea of like, well, you're just not feeding it. It's like, no, you're making an explicit action to not do something. In the case of Holodomor, it wasn't just...
That was my point, to be clear, is that the reason that was comparable to the Holocaust, right, is because the state took direct action to limit this, right? They and we have like the letters at the time from the state actors who actively, like, again, kept food from these people and things like that. But that is a fundamental different thing than had a famine hit the land and through, again, no one did anything wrong, but again, some people had food, some people didn't, and the people with food was like, I can't feed you too, right?
Wick, to be fair, though, if we look at the state of racial equity in this country, it's not like these are natural events and a famine just occurred. These are state actions that occurred that we can follow and trace, and we can point to some of the most obvious examples, redlining, or we can point to, a lot less pernicious examples like
quiet racism that happens, like just our internal biases. But
Well, that last bit isn't a state action.
Gentrification also causes
fair,
it
but
too.
there were state
Well, let's go for
Gentrification.
gentrification. Let's use gentrification as a thing. So I agree with you, right? That we can point to actions that the state has taken in the past that have actively and directly been intended to harm
and very
minority
recent
communities,
history,
right? Yes, but we can also point to actions that the state has took that has intended to help these individuals, right? That
Sure.
have led to disastrous results, right? We can point to
Sure.
actions taken by these groups to try to help themselves that have led to disastrous results. But we judge these differently. And just because, again, it's results-based thinking, just because a result is bad doesn't mean what was done was bad. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I follow.
So if let me try to explain by using the inverse. If I
Okay.
do something and then I have a good result, that doesn't mean what I did was necessarily good. So I'll give you an example. If I decide to steal all the food from a home because I want to steal all the food, turns out the food was poisoned, and had the people eaten that food, they would have died. I did a good thing. The result was good. I kept these people from being poisoned. But was me stealing food from this family a good thing? I would hope you would say no, correct?
Yeah.
But the result was great. The result was good. The result was a great thing. So
Sure.
we need to
I'm gonna have to- I'm
separate.
gonna have to-
Sure,
I'm
we
gonna
need
have
to separate the
chew on that.
result of an action from the morality of the action, right? From
Sure.
what actually happened as a result of thing versus
Okay,
what
but
if it was
here's
good
an
action.
example.
Also
Hold on.
happened.
Here's an example in America of things that are actionably happening against Black people that is just being allowed continuously, in part because of policy. For example, there are absolutely going to be cops. What's the name of the guy who killed George Floyd? I never try to remember murderers.
No, not Zimmerman.
Okay, sure,
Derek
the guy.
It's a
Derek
Derek
Chauvin.
If I could just finish.
Zimmerman was a
Okay.
different guy.
Zimmerman was
Zimmerman was Trayvon Martin.
Okay, the
Okay,
guy
okay,
who
okay.
killed George Floyd. I don't actually care about what his name is. Okay,
Chauvin.
he's not important. So he is a case. If you look at his history and record, he had multiple cases of being really needlessly escalatory with people. He had really poor trigger discipline because he had also shot a citizen in the past already, and he was brought back into the force regularly. There were specific concerns about the way that he engaged. It was less about like specifically Black people, but low income homeless individuals, which we also know George Floyd was a part of that intersection.
Yep.
And so like the idea that he got back, that he was just working beat, right? Like think about, did you guys see the video of the cop shooting the dog the other day?
Yeah, it was
No.
horrific. Yeah, I did.
Horrific.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, it's just a dog. No, it's a cop who has such low disregard for things like de-escalation and how to like basically find any means necessary to not kill things. Shooting the animal as it's sprinting away shows a massive lack of discipline and trigger. And so like when it comes to like police reform, I think there is specific biases towards like Black people, but it's just bad. Your guys'
don't
policing
disagree.
system's fucked up.
Yeah.
These are very, very specific policies
Mhm.
and things that are being done and not prosecuted that are disproportionately harming Black populations and, more importantly to me, low income, which conflicts with the racial groups, right?
I don't
Erudite,
disagree.
Can I ask a quick
But my
question?
question, yeah, you
said-
may, but to respond to Erudite real quick, I don't disagree at all. If you are here thinking that I am defending police who murder,
I don't think you are.
then,
No, we don't think you
then
are.
okay. That's
No.
I
I'm
just
saying
wanna
that
make
this is
clear
an
to the
action.
audience,
This is an
right?
action that the
I
government
understand.
is taking.
But
Yes.
the question is, how do we get them to change that action? And will burning down their precincts make them more or less likely
Well-
to shoot people? I don't know if it's going to make them less likely. We can see like the public support for Black Lives Matter, right? Right after the George Floyd was murdered, right? Was fairly high.
Look at,
but
why
then
don't you
as it
look at
continues,
policies
right?
that Canada implements and the fact that our cops shoot very often? For example, to be a cop in Canada, you typically have to have a bachelor's, which just creates a necessary friction of like education and the quality of people. Here's the thing. I don't want an uneducated, angry dumbass being a cop. I want cops to be better. I think angry dumbasses can go in the military and do. There's all sorts of places for angry dumbasses to go, but a police officer specifically not one. And when I look at the American policing system, I don't know how to not look at the Canadian policing system, which obviously has a different population, but there are a lot of racial tensions in Canada. It's just with a different people group specifically, which is Indigenous people. And looking at the shooting rates, looking at the trigger discipline, looking at the level of like accountability, it's not perfect. There are still problems that occur in Canada, but I can't help but look at the American system system, while it's different because of the size of populace that you guys have to manage, and go,
And also
there's
the
some
fact that
problems here that are...
Everyone has guns here, so it
Sure.
is less likely for a police officer in Canada to assume that the person that they are interacting with is armed. However, they have to assume that the person they're interacting with in America
They
is
don't
armed
need to
because
assume a
it's
dog
far,
is.
far along. I don't.
That's so
Again,
true.
I don't disagree that there are fundamental systemic issues with the police system that needs to be changed. What I disagree, and you may not even be saying this to be fair, right? This is maybe something that I'm unfairly assigning to you that you did not say, and if that's the case, I apologize. But I am just fundamentally disagreeing that in order to reach those changes, that we need to burn shit down. I think that's fundamentally going to move us further away from the goal rather than closer to the goal. And more importantly, I think it's fundamentally immoral for a single officer, even if the system is bad, right? For the results of a single officer, for you to go and burn down the cops and the precincts and attack people who were not involved in the incident. I just don't think that's okay.
Sure. I would grant you that, like, maybe if it was one instance of a cop being an asshole, like, and a murderous asshole specifically, but the issue is, like, nobody's pointing to being like, it's one, right? This is why, like, every time there's massive protests, we list off, like, Tony Timpa is literally the George Floyd situation with a white guy that just happened. Nobody's talking about it, and it's insane. It's insane that there's multiple cases of people being prone and kneeled on and dying as a result of a cop kneeling on them for, again, 14 minutes. Tony Timpa was also 14 minutes, right? It's insane. It escapes me. And so what it suggests to me is that there is active policy. I don't know what it is, because a lot of this is going to be behind closed doors that I'm not aware of, but there's some sort of active policy that is allowing police officers to feel probably they have not very good access to training. They tend to be lower educated. They tend to have very low pay for the high level of risk that they're taking on, right? So there's a number of reasons why this issue, and I'm not anti-police by any means. I'm pro-police, but I'm very concerned about policies. And I think that these are instances where people are saying this is an active harm. Now, I agree that I don't think violence is effective as a form of protest no matter what. I just don't see the evidence for it. But it does make me go, yeah, I understand it. And I definitely wouldn't say BLM trashing cop cars is unethical in any means.
I will,
sure.
and again, I
will...
just want to be clear, and I'll let you go, but I want to get to what's your name?
Totally.
𝕵𝖎𝖎 as well, because I know you're here. But I'll just say this, like, the racism and the racist policies in the police system in America are condemnable, and I condemn them even more than I condemn the people who are participating in violence in a riot or things like that. I think that we cannot condemn the riot without condemning the conditions that gave rise to the riot. But I still, again, condemn the people who are going around and burning cop cars. I think they're in their feels, right? And it's understandable.
It doesn't matter.
It gets it, but it
doesn't make it unethical.
Does.
They're in their fields because we have a situation where a 17-year-old from Kenosha has better trigger discipline than most average cops. That's the situation that we're in, and that's terrifying.
This idea that's just false.
Okay, right. Sure. Yeah. Let's say it's 20%. Maybe it's
not even. Do you know how many people? Wait. How many unarmed people? How many unarmed people do you think are shot in America by cops? Unarmed, to be clear.
I have no idea. Wait, are we gonna?
It's less than 100. It's less than 100. And do you know how many cops we have in America?
Okay, but in the case, this is
it's so the percentage.
In the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, right? While he's running along, he's actively not shooting very few people. In fact, one of the people he shoots had a gun on him, right? So he had better trigger discipline than I would expect from most cops in that situation. Absolutely. I'm not saying that most cops are running around just glacking people in the street. That's obviously not true. But the idea that, for example, we have so many cases of cops with what's the case? Daniel thing where he's crawling towards them, hands down prone, his pants fall down, he moves towards them, they shoot him in the back. We've got Dixie the dog just being like, hello, officer, gets shot 3 times as she's sprinting away and dying. I'm saying the trigger discipline is concerning to me. And I'm not saying that there's no explanation for it. I'm saying I am concerned that there's a there's a systematic issue of training, of policy. I don't know what it is specifically that is leading to these issues.
There is.
Yeah, and I'm so so grateful that you mentioned 8 Can't Wait ages ago, because those are, sorry, Wick,
those are
finish, but we got to get Perry in. And
okay.
then
Yeah. Sorry.
Roberto.
Those are 8 policies that it's a little deranged that Americans couldn't agree on that. Like after BLM, like that is something that I fought for, that I marched for, that I talked about constantly, is these 8 policies, because every single time I talked to a conservative, they were like, yeah, of course, we shouldn't be stepping on people's necks. And we weren't talking about defending the police. We were saying, hey, here are these strategic moments where we can alter the police so that they're more realistic. And a little bit to your point, maybe this is a little off the rails, but like it was frustrating that the only pushback that I kind of got when I started talking about these measures were from far left communists who were saying, hey, this doesn't go far enough, because actually if you require comprehensive reporting, that's actually funding, and we want to defund. And I was like, god damn it. Like,
yeah, they say they want a thing, but they're not willing to sacrifice to get it. It's weird. I want Perry to respond. He said he had some things to say about the cops, and then I want Roberto to have a space to ask his question. And then I see you, Vigilante. Don't worry.
I just want to say, in 2022, the total number of people shot to death by the police was 1,097.
How many were unarmed, though?
I don't have the unarmed number.
Yeah,
I pulled this up before you mentioned unarmed.
Because not everyone, just real quick, not every person who gets shot by the cops shouldn't have been shot. Some absolutely should.
Yeah, no. I agree, but the number either way is astronomically low, depending on based on the population and the amount of arrests that went on in 2022. But the black number is 225 people shot by the police.
Yeah, I understand, but then you compare that to other countries with like similar measures, like their numbers are so much lower than ours.
But other
so it sucks that we can't recognize
an armed populace.
Even
That's the issue.
even if sure, that's a whole very complicated
there.
issue.
Yeah,
it is a complicated. I will agree on this.
Well, this is why, for example, I would say police officers should be paid a lot more than they are paid, 100%. And they need to be way more trained. Absolutely 100%. Way more trained. There needs to be a higher level of calling. For example, the MMPI that is employed in part to determine whether or not they're a qualified thing looks for some level of antisociality in these cops. Now, I understand that that's in part because it allows them to basically be disagreeable fucks, but it's also concerning because there's so many situations where people are shooting to kill when they probably didn't need to, right? They're killing the dog. They're killing all sorts of like Tony Timpa. They're kneeling on people. And so it's clear. It suggests to me that there is this overarching, and part of your guys' issue, you guys don't even have a federal standard for your police. So like one precinct will have fantastic officers. Yep. And then the next one over is garbage fuck. Whereas in Canada, we have a much more federal standardized expectation when it comes to policing.
That's the problem. Well, that's the problem, right? We don't have a police problem. We have a precinct problem. And there's a fundamental difference. And the dangers, though, of federalizing these things, right, is it's great if you get the awesome precinct standards in, but it's terrible if you put the federal standards for the awful precincts as a federal level. So I'm mixed on this, on federalizing versus non-federalizing. But I want Roberto to be able to have his stay in the sun. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, man. I have a couple questions here. I'm gonna try to keep it like short and sweet as I can. I just want to like address like the first thing, basically, like when you're talking about how like we live in a country like with like mostly armed citizens, and like that's kind of like a big equalizer and issue. Hypothetically, if like the average U.S. citizen wasn't armed, do you think like we'd have like less police violence in the country?
I think that a police officer, like Wick said, they have to automatically assume that you're armed.
I think it would. I think it actually would.
Yeah.
I think
but I think that if we had national numbers that were lower, I would agree with Erudite that I think that the incidents would decrease. But as the way that it is right now, you have to assume that a citizen is armed.
But to be fair, in Canada, when cops engage with people, they are still trained to assume the worst possible outcome. Cops are not trained to be like, it's probably just a knife. It's Canada. Yeah. Cops in Canada are still trained, assume the worst case. There are guns in Canada, way less, obviously, but particularly people who are criminological are getting access to these anyways. Cops in Canada are taught to assume that if they're reaching, that it might be a gun. Absolutely.
Can I say something about the precinct thing real quick? Because I know that one of my local police departments, they hire people with high school educations. And the reason that they do that is because they can't get enough people to sign up.
Because they don't pay enough for the risk associated with it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the risk is the big thing because, you know, it can get pretty violent out there and people just don't want to do the job. So they have to take the people.
And then you attract the people who don't go
that aren't in it for the money, but are in it for kind of
Right.
the power dynamic, and
Right.
that just like that breeds so many more issues.
Well,
Right.
everyone.
Right. Right. Right.
It
Right.
also doesn't help that the all cops are bastards. No one who isn't
Yeah,
a
that
bastard
does not help at
doesn't
all.
want to go in, right? Like
Right.
policing has been demonized, rightly or wrongly, so much in
Well,
America that people who would otherwise be we would want them to be police officers refuse to do so because police are bad. Why would I want to uphold this system? But at the end of the day, someone's going to fill that void, and if it's not you, it's going to be someone who gets their jollies off on shooting a dog, right? Which is terrible, and we don't want that. But
Right.
Berto, you had more questions, or
Yeah, I mean, most of the questions I really had were for people that just kind of like rage quit the debate, which I was
I'm
really,
sorry.
really sad about. But just like for, I guess for like the anti-violence side of the panel, I was wondering if there is an example where violent protest was used to successfully enact like a actual policy change that actually affected the communities that protested, or has violence just outright like failed every time throughout history?
Not every time, right? We
I,
can.
I doubt it's failed every time. I'm sure there has been
No.
successful
well,
things.
I could think of a
Yeah,
ton
I
of
wouldn't. I think I'm
examples.
more extreme than both of them, and I wouldn't even go that far.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
go
like
ahead.
we can obviously point to the American Revolution. We can obviously point to the Civil War. Those were incredibly, incredibly violent situations, and I'm very pleased with the results of those two movements. Those are just the two most obvious examples. I'm sure there are plenty.
The
more,
Ukraine
but-
War is a like
Yeah,
pertinent
perfect.
Yeah.
current example
No,
of
totally.
that.
One of my
And I gave the
issues
Bosnian
is
War earlier.
Ukraine's a good example of them actively using as peaceful protests as possible over time and being basically forced to no other option because Russia rolled in with tanks and said "fuck you,"
Yep.
right? So they
And then
had to
right,
get
and
violent.
at that point you have to get violent. But one of the things that the reason that I brought up Detroit is because you have a modern parallel in a place like Ferguson. Ferguson has been destroyed by those riots that went on there, and all of those businesses, they're all still boarded up, and the people that have to live there, the
Oh.
black people that have to live there, they're now going to suffer the consequences for generations over what happened in Ferguson. And nothing was accomplished that's going to help those people. So that's really my biggest issue with the violent protest is... Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So I think we got to be really cautious here with not painting with a broad brush. Like we have to make sure that when we use these sort of like glasses to analyze the situation, we don't glue them to our faces. Like there are times where riots has happened in this country pretty recently, and really, really positive change has occurred in these communities. Now, I don't have any offhand examples, and maybe you can criticize my position for that, but I would be so surprised if I can't point to a pretty violent riot where the city went, you know what, fuck, we got to listen to these people, changed it, and it ended for the better. Now, I'm like, I guess what I'm saying is,
like honestly
this is a tough
though,
thing to
just to
navigate.
let you know, at least in America, I can't speak globally, but in
You don't think there
America,
is?
at least in the last 20 years, I can't think of a single example.
Okay, maybe. And
Yeah. I might be wrong.
wouldn't-
I might be just
No.
ignorant.
My
And I wouldn't
attention-
go the last 20 years. Like I'm sure that there were
If
cities.
you extend the time period back far enough, we can find an example.
But like
I will
obviously the Black
posit
Panthers
that,
fed their
right?
population, right? And we need to acknowledge that. Like
But I
yes, they
think-
got in shootouts with the
Sure.
police, but they also were the only organization who's willing to feed these black children. I guess
But
is
the Black Panthers were a community police force, first and foremost. They were
that's what I'm
there for
saying.
self-defense in the neighborhood, not just from the police, but from white racists that wanted to come in and burn things down. And
course.
in that instance, that's where we're coming into a situation like the Ukraine war. Are you going to let these people come in and destroy your home? Or are you going to
Yeah.
defend it?
We have to
You
be
know,
super careful of being like,
respectfully.
well, this group did some nice things, therefore it would be the same argument of being like, wherever let's say like where police officers are killed, there's a lot of like corruption in a precinct. They're like, yeah, but they also play soccer with the homeless youth.
Right.
And it's just
Right.
like, yeah, but also like
Yeah.
that doesn't actually matter. So I'm not weighing in on Black Panthers one way or the other. I don't have enough like historical knowledge to do so. But I just want to make sure that we wouldn't hold that standard for any other group that we thought was
No,
good,
and I'm
right?
not
Like,
holding that
nobody be
standard
like,
for
yeah,
the
but
Black
Hitler
Panthers.
was such a good painter and he was really nice to his mom, right? Like nobody
No,
thinks
no.
that. And I know you're not doing that, but it's the
Okay.
logical consistency that I'm looking for.
No, for sure. Yeah, no. And I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to paint with a broad brush. I want to look at this with nuance. And I think that there are a lot of positivities that we can point to this group, so much more so than your extreme examples.
I want to give
I-
you.
I
and
think
understand
there's
why you
another
hate them, but-
distinction that doesn't get made. The distinction between protesters acting violently and people using the distraction of a protest to commit violence. and that distinction is very rarely made.
But we can't. It's so hard to make that distinction because when you're in those riots, it's impossible to really like separate.
Particularly if
those
a
people
riot
out.
is going on. Like, say, this is
And
actually
I-
one of the benefits that MLK points out, not to like bring it up to MLK, because I know everyone was like super upset by that, but MLK talks about specifically why nonviolence was so important to him in like I think a 1963 address, where he talks about like the reason why you want to be a nonviolent protester is so that when police choose violence against you, it's obvious, right? This is the case of like the Iranian protests that are going on right now. They're almost completely non-violent. All they're doing is taking off headscarves, burning it, and dancing in the streets and stuff like that. And the police brutality was so bad that Iran had to crack down on TikTok because everyone in the world was seeing it. It was horrible. Yeah. And this is a case where non-violence went out. In talking to people who have friends and family in Iran, women are not wearing their hijabs nearly as often. The headscarves are gone. Things are. It's not better. The supreme dictator is not overtaken yet. I'm not saying everything's fixed. But what I am saying is that the role of the protester taking the non-violent role is so that if you believe that systems are that against Black people, which to some degree I think might be true, then that means that when they choose violence, it highlights their failing, which I know is a big ask, which is why I'm not necessarily making the ask. However, I do think it is a very effective measure of protest.
And and there's a direct corollary.
Just real quick, we need to because we are running out of time. But there is this lost art of martyrdom, and this was a very purposeful thing. Dr. King knew that people were going to get beaten up and killed and injured, mauled, etc. He knew it was going to happen, and that is why he made it very clear: do not fight back. And he praised the courage of those who were able to be struck and not strike back, because it was super effective. I want two things. Okay, one, gang, if you like this content, if you're enjoying these kinds of discussions, you gotta support me. Hit that like button if you're watching this on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on Kick. Give me some subs. We got it monetized on Kick. That'd be nice. We could use the support. If you're watching this on Twitch, give me some subs. Give me some bits. I can't keep doing this for free. I do need to get some money. So tip your host. So thank you. But I want to give Vigilante a chance to have a question, and then we'll shut this down after we go through Vigilante's discussion. Then we'll kind of table this and we'll move on. Go ahead.
So you were talking about the statistics of people who were killed by police. I did actually find the actual statistics from last year. 98 people were totally unarmed, but 73 people were armed with a vehicle. I don't know why the fuck that counts as a arming thing. Basically, only
they tried to run over the cop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess in that case that would make sense. If they actually tried to run over the cop. But basically only 681 people in total that were killed by the police last year had a gun. So that's those statistics that you were talking about. And when you were talking earlier, you had mentioned we need to separate the intention from what actually happened. Well, I have contention with that, because even with bringing up what 𝕖𝖓 was talking about with the Holodomor started with good intention. Part of the reason why that started is because of the fact that they were trying to collectivize the land, and then that caused the landowners to burn the fields and stuff like that, and that caused the famine, and then the government exacerbated it. So saying we need to separate intentions isn't not necessarily a good thing, because intentions can still be good and bad things come out of it.
I agree. But we can't ignore them either, right? We can't. When I'm passing moral judgment, right, on someone, The intention absolutely matters. And if you are trying your best to do a good thing, but it ended up doing a bad thing, I will judge you much less harshly than if you are actively trying to do a bad thing, but end up doing a good thing instead. I think that's worse, actually. And I want to incentivize people to have good intentions. And so we try to nudge behaviors. Anyone else want to respond to this before we close it out?
I want to respond to the question. I'm sorry, I don't know her name. One of the guests that came in. Tempest. Okay. She was talking about how fuck, I forgot. Well, essentially what I wanted to say was one of the biggest issues is with Martin Luther King, you always had him at the forefront, even if things were to get violent from another group, whether it was the Nation of Islam, the Black Power group, he was always there to denounce it. And we don't have that today. We don't have people who are denouncing it. You have people like Maxine Waters who go up and they say that rioting is fine. You have AOC. You have people like that out in the public square saying that these things are okay. And that's where a lot of the issues come from. It becomes hard for people who aren't ideologically bought into these issues to want to support them when they see so many people supporting the negatives of the thing. Right. I think that's why a lot of the 8 Can't Wait stuff got blocked, because it got overtaken by the all cops are bastards movement. And then once you're lumped in with that sort of group, nobody wants to listen to you. Right. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, gang, for being here. We are going to.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Of course. Again, tomorrow, call-ins. Wednesday, Origin. Thursday, I'll be debating Big Papa Fascist. And Friday, we'll have the contraception. Saturday, we'll be fighting Sunday. For now, we're going to rate out. Who's streaming still? Any of you still streaming? Going to be streaming for a while? Anyone? No? Then we'll go to Prime Kai. Boom, 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 boom. And we'll send you over to him on YouTube as well. Remember?
All right, bye, guys.
Bye. See you later. Yeah, if you need
Thanks
to go,
so
just go.
much.
Don't.
Bye.
Don't
Bye, bye,
do
bye,
it.
Thank you so
Here.
much for having me.
I always love
course.
getting called white
See you guys.
supremacist.
I would
Thanks
love
so
to have
much,
you again,
Perry.
Perry. And Staxiums and all of you would be great.
Yeah.
Let me.
Thanks, Wick.
Bye.
I was a
I'm
little
in a
flustered.
Diablo
I didn't
dungeon,
have
man.
time to prepare,
Freaking
but
me out. Actually, here, wait, I got.
no, that was fun. Thanks for having me, Wick.
Of course. It was well, I'm sure we'll talk later, right? Should we make drugs? Okay, say. And then I'll end the stream. Okay. Have fun. Bye.